To the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In case of fire, there are two ways to exit the chambers. To my left, your right, you exit through the double doors, turn left, walk down the flight of stairs, again turn left, and outside of the building. Or the best way perhaps is at the rear of these chambers. In either case, once you're outside of the building, please walk a safe distance away from the building. Secretary, please take the roll.
Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lafakis.
Here.
Mary Scott is absent. Virginia Higley.
Here.
Ken Nelson is absent. Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar.
Here.
And Richard Suzak is here. Mr. Chair, I'd like just to make a motion for, some modifications to our agenda today. And I'd like to suggest that we change site land review 1750 from 14A to 7A, and public hearing 2921 from 9B to 9A.
Second. Oh.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Linda DeGray is sitting in for the absent commissioner, if there was one.
There's two absent commissioners.
Oh,
And Sarah.
I'm sorry. Okay, I wasn't paying attention. You are. Alderman Gruber. Okay.
Fire.
Yes, that's what I said. The one who exit through the doors.
That's right.
Okay, that's all right.
You're not paying attention.
Town attorney's report.
We haven't received a report, most likely because there's no pending litigation going on for planning and zoning.
Right, okay. Any questions for the staff, for the town attorney? Hearing none, we'll move along. The zoning enforcement officer, that's on your desk tonight with pictures. I'll give you a few minutes to take a look at that. If you have any questions, we are fortunate he's here with us tonight.
I do have one. The Enfield Pizza, is he now stopped parking there?
He has. He went before ZBA for an appeal and, a variance, and they denied it. So,
Yeah.
as of the issuance of the cease and desist order, there hasn't been any parking issues there.
Okay, thank you.
I have one. There's a house at the beginning of South Road, up by the Hazardville side, not the Enfield Street side. And there's the owner has put up a lovely stone entryway, but it's on the town property.
That's a picture in there.
Oh, it is in there. Oh,
It's already
sorry.
been addressed with a notice of violation.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Okay, it's all right. You just got him, but you can't expect a
You're good.
fast reader.
You are very good.
Any further questions? After you scan them, they just have them. Well, if you have any after you take them home and take a look at them, give them a call and we'll find out what's happening. Moving along, approval of minutes, June 21st.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the draft minutes for the meeting dated June 21, 2018.
Second.
Motion's made, seconded. Discussion? Any errors, additions, or omissions?
Is this?
This is a regular meeting.
Okay, because I did notice something on page 4. It says Chairman Duran closed the public meeting in the second to last paragraph in terms of that wasn't
Pick
closed.
that up too, yes.
Wasn't closed at that point. And then I'd like to sort of discuss on the next page, page 5, in terms of where we voted on the motion. You know, I think that the vote was 3-4, 4 against, and 0 abstentions, or?
No, I think the motion was to not, oh, I think you're right.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the motion was to approve.
Yes.
And you always give, you know, the
Right.
number that tries to approve it first, and then the denial second.
Right.
Otherwise, it would have been approved, you know, 403. So
Right.
it should be 340.
304. Right.
So 304, the 3 would be voting
Similar
for.
along with that,
think there was
it goes with that. On page 4 of 12 that was pointed out,
Against, and 0 abstentions. Yeah.
right where Rich pointed out, Chairman Duran asked 3 times, would speak in favor or against the application, no one came forward. Then I closed the public hearing, that should be out.
Correct.
That shouldn't be there. And then what happened, I'm sorry, the commission was closed at that point, because the next part, I think, is a discussion we had, private, just the commission.
Well, it actually says that Mrs.
And-
Dearborn's husband stated that if the commission.
Yeah, that should be up above.
Well, so I think what
That should be prior to it, because he wouldn't have talked.
So I think what happened was you essentially tried to close the public hearing, more discussion was had with the applicant, and so you essentially opened it up again because.
But again, I couldn't have closed it.
Right, I think you tried to.
Started to,
You
and then
started
somebody
to, and
started
then there was
speaking
talk.
again.
All right, so.
So we should just take the chair, the
All right,
first.
if that's
the
what you
first
say, okay.
Closed,
The first closed out.
yeah.
Okay. And then,
I would just delete the
but
first
then the
closed.
part up above is the committee discussion where Commissioner DeGray stated the state requires, because that wasn't with him or anybody else. So I think that was when we were discussing it.
But then he responded,
No,
she responded, Ms. Dearborn confirmed this.
And then I even asked a question after that to them, that I posed to them, so.
Yeah, there was more discussion with the applicant at that time.
Yeah,
all right, well,
So
okay,
close is probably in a good place down at the bottom. of it.
right.
Yeah.
okay.
The second.
So on
closed.
page 4, I would take out that second to bottom paragraph, Chairman Duran closed.
Yep.
But I would leave in the second one
Yes.
on page 5, above the paragraph, Ms.
Okay,
Picacha.
so I would have asked again 3 times
Right.
and then closed, okay. And,
And I think the vote is normally, you know, for the motion, against the motion, and abstaining the motion.
right, it would be
So-
304.
So it should be 340.
340.
Yes.
Right.
Because it's for, against, and abstaining.
Right. I think, and we had changed, and that's why you have 2 motions on the table. I mean, that the staff gives you 2 motions is that make sure you pay attention to what motion is made, and that was made a positive.
That's why I asked before I voted.
Okay. Okay,
Because it does say to approve
right.
here.
Yeah, so we got it, okay, Richie, then you got that right. Did you get all those corrections?
Yeah, it's just that you stated that the public hearing was closed, so I don't know if you should strike that from the record, you want that just gone, even though you said it's closed?
No, there's none, where they're paged, the ones on page 5 are correct. The one on, I didn't close it, apparently, according to the rest of them, that I attempted to, and she wanted to talk. And I apparently let her, you'd have to go to the tape, but I
say
don't
that then?
think,
I think I remember that happening. I think you could say tried to close public hearing because that would,
yeah, okay.
I think that would reflect what you said and then what happened afterwards.
Okay, because I did ask, and then she wanted to talk, so I usually let them, and that's what must have happened. Okay. Anything else, Rich? I found the same thing myself on page 9, I think I found.
On the vote number.
Chairman asked if anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against the application. And Karen, well, I could have asked 3 times, but I wouldn't because she came up, so I wouldn't have asked again.
Right, you did down here, you asked again.
Yeah, I asked again after she talked. I have to. So
I
just
guess we
strike
would
the
just
3
strike
times.
3 times in the first iteration of it, on page 9.
That's,
No, both of them were good because
no,
Well, he-
I didn't ask
after she
3.
talked, he had to ask again.
Right, the first
Yeah.
time,
The
he
first
didn't ask
time
3
I didn't
times.
ask 3 times. I just asked if
Yes,
they
the
wanted to
first
speak.
time.
Yeah.
That
Then
was
she
the
came
first
up.
time.
Yeah.
So, anything further? Hearing none, all in favor as amended? Unanimous. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for the June 28th special meeting.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Any errors, additions, or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? 1, 2, 3,
I'll abstain from the
5.
vote.
Any
I abstained.
abstentions?
2 abstentions.
Okay. And now, no bond releases. We do public. At this point, the meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comments, concerns, and opinions relating to planning and zoning in Enfield from anyone who is present, provided no one may discuss any matter of business at this time that's already elsewhere on the agenda. Any matter that is part of an open public hearing of the commission, or any matter where a decision of the commission may be pending. Anyone in the audience would like to speak to the commission under those conditions, please come forward, sir. Name and address.
Steve Cogtella, 2 South River Street, and I think I fall within those guidelines. I'd like to discuss a little bit about the River Gateway workshops and a little bit of the zoning that's going to
It's
be.
not on the agenda, right?
Okay. I've been attending most of those workshops. I think I missed just one of them. And I have some concerns with the last Rivergate workshop that took place on June 28th. I think there were several unresolved issues that had taken place, and there was discussion on them, but it really wasn't resolved to give the consultant direction on which way to finalize that document. And some of the issues were density on North River Street. There was a great deal of discussion on that, but there wasn't any resolution on to which way to direct the consultant to finalize his final draft on that. Also, with regard to River, there was also something stated by the consultant regarding River Gateway 2 being changed to River Gateway 1 south of the boat launch. And he stood up at that time, we were almost exiting, and he made a statement that that was going to be considered by him or done by him, and there was no discussion on it whatsoever. The other issue that I think is a major concern for me is that with regard to the easement, and it's specified that in River Gateway 4. First, it stated it wasn't going to be on the private property, and then it was up in the air whether it may be considered on private property. So at this point in time, I have absolutely no idea what direction the consultant is taking with his final document, which I believe is probably almost done or done. And there's not going to be a subsequent workshop where we could have questions and answers and kind of have an informal discussion and get a better understanding of what the document consists of and having an explanation.
We are going to have public hearings.
Yeah, I was really hoping that something informal would take place so we could get a better understanding. I, for one, don't understand a lot of the terminology that's utilized, and I'd like to get a better understanding of that. As well as some concerns that I may have that could be addressed prior to a public hearing. And my concern is having a public hearing. Everything's just about finalized, so I'm really hoping that the commission will consider our concerns and make the necessary adjustments to address those concerns, should they be valid.
Usually what happens is, and I hope to have 2 or 3 public hearings in different sections of the town, hoping that people, let's say out in Skidco, are going to be as interested in what goes on down here as maybe not as much as you people would be, but it's benefit to the town. It's why we're doing the changes. And hope to have them in several places, and then what we generally do is, because it's our application, we can there's no time limit on it. And we would go back to the drawing board in between time. We've done that before when we do the zone changes. For example, one we have up tonight has been going on for a little while. We've been back and forth straightening things out. So if you pick up, are these the final report from the
That is the
consultant?
latest, yeah, the latest information received from the consultant.
So we will go to public hearing with those.
Yep.
So that's what will happen.
Okay, we can get a
Hopefully we'll have people on board. I know our new planner, well, no, she
Next step up,
That-
planner boss.
isn't on due until the 6th of next month. So it's going to be a little hesitant for in between, because we got to have some help up above and in the office and some.
Well, that's somewhat reassuring, but but one thing I really want to emphasize, at least what's really important to me, is this easement issue on private property, if that's what is going to be considered in the final document. And it's not only a privacy issue, but it's a security and safety issue. I routinely use the river a lot, and everybody on the river has riparian rights, and we use the water, and we store boats down there, jet skis. I've even had an airplane on my property, and I don't need people wandering through on an easement, and people just don't stay on an easement. They're going to wander around. They're going to get into, there's vandalism associated with that. There's theft, and I think we should learn a lesson from what happened down at the Scandic. I think we should be learning a lesson what's happening around the pond right now, and now we need for a neighborhood watch and everything that's going on. We don't need to provide an invitation, at least in my opinion, to bring them down there and do that. Now, if the town has property, that's fine. And the thing of it is, I'm not trying to be selfish to say, well, this is mine, and we don't want to let the other people down there. The thing is, the town has river access. They have 2 boat launches in this town, one below and one above the dam.
One's state and one's local.
Yeah, but the one by the proposed train station, that's 200 feet along the river. It's shared with the boaters. It's shared with the fishermen. The town recently acquired 28 South River Street. That's an acre and a half. That's 275 feet of river frontage. The town is in the process of acquiring the Eversource property. That's 1 3/4 acres. That's 350 feet along the river. I'd like to see the town do something with what it has in its possession right now, rather than start disrupting or proposing to disrupt people's lives along the river, saying, well, we want to take this and we want to take that, to have an easement, and allowing for structures, municipal structures. I don't even know what that means. I don't know if it's a bench or an outhouse. I don't know. I know when I go on my deck, I want an unobstructed view of the river. I don't want to be looking at people. I don't want to be looking at structures, and I think we need to be respected in that regard.
Okay, do you have that written down? Because otherwise, unless...
I don't have it written. I just made a bunch of notes here, but I mean, it's on video anyway, right?
Well, yeah, but pulling that out and staff putting that where it's going to belong, like we have in our packets tonight, material that was handed to us by another gentleman on the river front, but that's in the file. So if you could even if you just number them of what you said and
yeah, I could do that with Jen.
just so that she can put it in the file, so that she makes it part of that record. Because otherwise, who knows where it's going to end up.
Yeah, I think not only myself, but I think other people will do the same thing.
Taken, yes.
Yeah, and like I said, I just have a bunch of notes scribbled down here just so I could,
I appreciate it.
Provide some information.
Make the points and hand them to Jen, and she'll get them in the right place.
Okay. And I'll end on that note, because like I say, the town currently has river access for the public. And like I say, I would just like to see them do something with what they already have in their possession, as I stated. And I mean, even 33 North River Street, they've had that for 4 years now, if you include the time the Community Development had it, which was an agency for the town. And it's really a blighted building right now. It's in worse shape now than it ever was, I'd like to see them do something with what they have, rather than want to acquire more property and have more ideas that may never materialize.
I don't know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to address the commission? Yes, the gentleman in the back, right?
Hi there. My name is Pat Gaskell. I live at 94 South River Street. Now, I also am going to reiterate what Steve had
All right, let me
had stated
remind you.
about the
It's a
Rivergate.
separate type of hearing, and I don't know,
I'm just giving public comment right now.
right, but if it concerns that, it'll get lost.
It is, but what I observed at the workshops that I did go to, it just seemed like that last workshop, it was thrown. Everything was like at the end. I mean, it was a late workshop that we were all there, and it was just like last minute.
That's true.
That it was thrown together, and then it was just that was it. There was no other conversation on it, and that's all I want you to do is consider. I mean, what that new proposal that that the consultant is giving you has changed. That I mean, the open space on the property of South River Street. Now, I did some research on the EPA about what open space is. And open space is any piece of land that is undeveloped, has no buildings or any other structures, and is accessible to the public. And it just doesn't make sense to make a residential area open space.
Sir, again, at the public hearings or at the hearings where we're going to do this. is
Oh,
the
I'm
proper
going to do
place
that too. I just want to.
We don't object to it, but what you're saying is going to get, who knows?
Well, there was no other.
Out up above somewhere. It's not
Right,
the-
but as it stopped, I just wanted to make sure that, like I said, that you acknowledge that last workshop, it just seemed like it was all thrown together, and then I did see the results from it, and we're only going to have a public hearing, and after the public hearing,
I
you can
hope
make a
have
vote on
more-
it, right?
I would like to have 3 or 4 before we come up with the final thing. So you're going to have probably many changes in that between now and the final hearing of it.
Will we be able to voice our opinion after
They're
those
all
points,
public
after the public
hearings,
hearing
right.
too? I mean, after the public hearing too. That's my concern.
Well, if we have 3 or 4 public hearings, yes. Once I close it, no.
Right. That's all I'm
But
afraid
you've
of.
been to
That's
most
all
of
I
the
want to.
hearings,
My
so I
concern
know
is.
I'll see you.
Well, my concern is just to keep an open mind about that there was a lot of changes.
Minds are all open and they have to stay open.
Okay.
And, they've been that way.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay.
And we do listen to the public, so we encourage anybody who has an opinion to come and talk to us, so that it gives us an idea of what the public, really wants and what we need to sort of address.
Right, and like I said, like that last workshop, there was so much going on. It was so late. I didn't really have the understanding of what the open space was, because that involves all of South River Street, which is all of residential.
Right.
And that's why, and we didn't really have much comment, and that's why I was concerned. That's all. But I appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
But again, hopefully we'll see you at the hearings when we start them. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Good evening. Earlene Preventer, 94 South River Street. I'm not going to stay up here too long, but you were talking about these public hearings that you were going to have. You're going to have 2 or 3 or 4 of them. But you did not mention once that you were going to notify the residents of that area. And I want you to consider that. Thank you.
We have to advertise all public hearings in the newspaper, and generally it's done in the JI.
How about on the website?
There's nothing on the web.
I mean, we don't get newspapers.
They also, it's on the website, our agenda is
Mail us a
posted.
letter. How about that?
Could we can actually put some kind of notifications in adjacent to the properties that are going to be have a public hearing like we normally do in terms of that's kind of a notification.
But you
that,
can't, where are you going to put it? Because we're
Well, we
talking
would
about the whole area.
Yeah, but we would probably put it in a few places along South and North River Street to just alert everybody that that's the area of the public hearing.
Can't, because it's a town public
It's
hearing.
a town public
We
hearing.
don't do
You
signage for. But what I would suggest is, I know how overworked you guys are upstairs, but maybe you could take the agenda, highlight it, and put the highlighted copy on the webpage. Or if anyone is confused, stop in to the office on the second floor and see if the date has been set yet for the public hearing.
No, they haven't. They probably won't until we get.
Well, no, but
get
I'm
staff.
just saying, they can stop in when they want, and they can make sure that they're not missing anything.
Anyone else? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Quinones. I live in 42 South River Street. I've been there for 17 years. Today, I came to the town hall for a meeting regarding the bridge, and I swear I didn't even know this meeting was going on. Something so important as possibly taking somebody's property, and you're making a big deal about sending 40 people a letter?
There has been nothing mentioned about taking
This is the first
anybody's
I ever
property.
hear of this River Gateway thing. There's no signs or, unless you're in the mix, you don't know what's going on. Basically what I'm saying is reach out to the community and let them know what's going on so we can get involved. South River
It's been
Street
on
is
t-
beautiful.
It's been on the
A
town
little letter.
website.
I don't go to the town website. I work practically 16 hours a day. I don't read the JI. What I'm saying is, what about those people who don't do that? What's it going to cost the town to send a little postcard? Hey, we're having a meeting regarding South River Street. They may impact your
Sir,
property.
This covers the whole town from Alden Avenue to what's south.
There's a proposal. I saw a copy of something that said redistrict,
Renfield
extend districts, Rivergate something to South River Street. I would say something that important. Do you don't think you would, just like they did with the bridge?
Sir, that's
they
one
put
part
something
of
on
it.
the door and they said, hey, you got a problem with the bridge, this is what we're going to do.
Sir,
Basically
if
what
it's
I'm
your
saying
property,
is
you
reach
should
out to the
be
community.
interested in what's going on. And
Well, I
it's
tell you
been-
now, if you guys go back to that bike path thing you want to do on South River Street, I don't know if you record me, it's going to get worse. I am going to fight for South River Street, even if I have to do it by myself.
You know, he's got a great point. We hate being left in the dark, really.
Can't call out from the audience. If anybody wants to speak, they have to come up.
Oh, I know.
I'm Jim Sprazza, and I'm on 88 South River Street.
Name and
Sir,
address.
He just did.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's a communication thing. It's basically, like the gentleman that just before me said, we didn't get any information, and he didn't, we heard it through hearsay. And
Have you ever watched these programs?
watch these programs, what do you mean?
P&Z, you watch the
On
town
occasion,
council?
I've seen the public hearings and what on TV.
Do you watch them?
Better things to do? Absolutely.
It's not like it's on my.
All right, I'm sorry.
But it's a communication thing is what we really need because we don't want this to happen without us speaking our word. So the postcard or the letter, the website,
It's
the town
impossible.
hall.
Do you figure out the cost of postcards?
I don't.
to
It doesn't
everybody in
matter.
the town
It
of
doesn't. No. It shouldn't be. Cost should not be talked about. Money should be
Sorry.
talked about.
Will you stop yelling out? Otherwise, I have to call the police department because this is all recorded. It's on TV, and you act as adults, or we have to stop, and I'll clear the hallway.
Understood.
Now go ahead.
Yes, about the gateway that they're talking about and the information. I just caught wind of this week, and I didn't know anything about it, and not a lot of people on the street didn't know anything about it either. The other thing is, we just found out that this meeting here was tonight. I found out yesterday.
We always meet on the second Thursday.
But we don't know what you're meeting about. And it like
I don't know how, unless we float a hot air balloon over this town, there's no
Or
way.
send us
We
a-
have a
a letter
website. We
that-
have a website.
to involve us in the. We pay taxes in this town, correct?
I'm sorry, yes, we all do also.
We
but
do, and we want to speak, and we want to be a part of the whole growth process.
We love to have you, sir, but this is not going to solve it. If you want this input, you're going to have to come to the public hearings when we have them for the
I'll be more
Thompsonville
aware
Gateway.
of it now that I caught wind of what really is starting to happen and what.
Well, I was surprised
Enfield-
because we've always had about 5 or 6 at every meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just want to know, I understand that this seems like a big thing because you just learned of it. But if you go on the town website, which is where we post our agendas, we also post them here in Town Hall. And these are advertised, and we have our regular meetings that meet every 2 weeks. And so I would urge you, and I understand. So I would just say this is a good thing because it sort of, everyone realizes, wow, this is how we know what's going on in government. You check the agenda, you do all these things, because otherwise the town can't mail notice to every member of the town of Enfield every time something's going to happen.
No, but I mean, in the areas that are being affected is basically what I'm trying to get at. And I understand what you're saying. And you know what? It is an eye-opener that we all should check the town website almost maybe on a daily,
Absolutely.
because things change daily. And you're right. So for me, it is an eye-opener. And I will look at the agenda, and I could show up at future hearings and see what's
When
going on.
we have the public hearings now concerning this, and again, hopefully there's 4 or 5, and that's why I say I want to go out to Hazardville too. Those people have as much interest as what goes on down here, not as much as you people do, perhaps, that live down here, but it's their town, as you said.
Yeah.
And will they show up? I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. But
I can't go out with a lasso and drag them in.
No, but I think their situation down there is a little. They don't have to deal with what we're going to have to deal with.
There's been articles in the newspaper, not just the legal ads. There's been articles in the newspaper.
You can also sign up on the website to get notifications for when agendas are posted in your email. So whenever we post the agendas, if you sign up for that list, you get a notification. You can get email, you can get text message that says that an agenda has been posted, and you can view it.
Okay, so that's
They'll
another
give you
good
all
form
kinds of notifications.
That's
from
a good
the town.
communication.
And another great thing about many of these hearings being
Well, that's email to email, though. That's the notification.
Another great thing about some of these hearings being posted on YouTube is you can sign up similarly for alerts on YouTube, so you can get notifications every time there's a town council meeting that's being broadcast, every time there's a planning and zoning
That's
meeting
another one you should
that's
be
being
watching is
broadcast.
town council. That's your
Wetlands, Board of
taxes there.
Education. So you can similarly get those all in your email as they're happening, and of course after the fact.
Yeah, and, and you're right. I could. I mean, this affects just my little corner. Is basically what it affects.
Oh, you should take
the rest of the
interest
town.
in the whole town because it's your town.
It is true. It is true. I'm just worried about my little corner of South River Street. That's all.
You should worry about your neighbor's corner as well.
Well, we should worry about what's across the
And I
railroad
hope
tracks
that's
too. But
your people in Hazardville and
that's just another story.
The southern end of town are also interested in your corner.
I'd rather live in Hazardville, to be honest with you.
Well, okay.
Anyway.
Please, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Form an association down there so they can get.
I know. Right, that's true.
Hi, I'm Debbie Gaskell, and I live at 94 South River Street. I'm not going to speak a lot. I know you made it clear that we would be going to public hearing, but I would like to say that there were a number of workshops that discussed the proposed changes to zoning down in the area in and around South River Street and the proposed transit center. All of these workshops had documents that were presented for the public, and if there were changes made at the very last minute, like I'm understanding there were changes, and this final document was not presented in a workshop type format, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Immediately changes being made at the end of a meeting and then going directly to a public hearing. I think that it's important to remember that when property that's zoned residential, and you know more about this than I do, but it becomes open space, there are some drastic changes. There are some drastic changes for rights of homeowners. And I've kind of remained quiet, and I tend to be a listener, and, I'm learning. And there's nothing I want better than to revitalize Thompsonville, really. I'm all for, some positive energy down there, the train station, extra policing, love to hear that. I'm all about that, really. But what I'm not about is violating rights of homeowners who have been anchors in the community. And I ask you to consider that your homeowners are assets and not obstacles to to what is being planned for revitalization.
If I remind you, at the hearings, there was nothing about taking anybody's property. The only thing that was mentioned was a right-of-way over land, which was mentioned.
Your rights
that
change.
Was on a certain section, but their zoning, there was no mention of the changing the zoning except back to approximately what it should be.
In other words,
right now you're outzoned.
Uses that are there now continue. It's generally only upon a redevelopment that those other things come into play.
And there are privacy concerns that will change with open space and designated. And there's a lot in the document that I would really, like more understanding about, and I'd like to have some questions answered. There's more there than I could really comprehend. And as a
hearing will be the place to do that, ma'am.
I would like to have a workshop. I'm just going to request that we have a workshop.
A workshop is what you have at a public hearing. We will have several of them. There will be no votes taken until you're notified that there's going to be one, will be a final one.
Can I ask why we are now going to public hearing and not having another workshop?
You have to have a public hearing so it's on record instead of the workshops. And right now we have all the information that the consultants have given us and that we have talked about. Now we're ready to go to the public and hear what you have to say.
Okay.
But we have to hear what you have to say several times and then discuss it and come back and modify what we've done. The modifications will probably go 2 or 3 times.
Well, I'm hopeful that the information that will be presented is consistent with the document that was put in front of public.
Waiting here now. Attorney Smith, how many times have we dealt with your modification of zoning regulation?
This is about the 5th time, I think.
And again, if there were changes, I would hope that the public would have an opportunity in a workshop session.
You'll be notified again by the things that that our alternate Gruber mentioned.
Well, I want to end by just thanking everyone for, the amount of energy that we're putting into trying to do something positive in Thompsonville. It's very important, and I'm all for that. But I really would ask that we value the consistent homeowners who've remained consistent throughout the number of decades that a lot of revitalization attempts have been put forward.
Nothing to do except to try to make things better for you down there.
Okay. It's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Apologize for before. I just have a simple question so I can understand this a little bit better. Anthony Quinones, 42 South River Street. This River Gateway Districts, is this part of the plan of conservation and development, or is this a whole separate thing? I thought the town went by the plan of conservation and development every couple of years. It's my understanding, but I may be wrong. I'm trying to figure out where this came from.
Development, no, this will be a change in our regulations to try to do something with the downtown area to try to bring it back
Okay, so
alive.
it has nothing to do with the town's plan of conservation and development.
Well,
Yes, it does.
it always has something to do with the town's, plan of conservation and development. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring, all the new sections or all the sections of the town into some kind of compliance. Right now, there's a lot of, property that is non-compliant and doesn't fall into any kind of category. And it's just a quagmire in order to try to make modifications in these areas. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, a zoning district that allows all the existing structures that are there now to be conforming so that it's an easier transition for somebody to do something on their property rather than always having to have a special use permit. So in that sense, we're simplifying everything, and we always look at the plan of conservation and development as a guide as to what the future should be for the town itself and the different districts that exist in the town. So in that sense, we have to look at a lot of different documentation and consider all the recommendation and especially the input from the public, so that if you feel strongly about a certain aspect of something, and obviously it has to be sort of recognizing that there has to be a majority, you know, of opinion, so to sway us one way or another, so that, you know, and every opinion counts. So, you know, what we again would recommend is that everybody who has an opinion and feels strongly about something is to again come to these, you know, meetings that we're going to have and voice an opinion, and you know, we will listen to everybody and weigh everybody's, you know, opinion before we make a decision. And again, you know, we are separate entities up here, and everybody has a different opinion up here as to what something should be also. But you know, obviously our main obligation is to the public itself and their opinion.
More so than the
May I
consultant
suggest-
who would suggest open space by the
well,
river?
again,
May
that
I suggest
consultant.
there are
let him-
no
I'm
open
listening to him.
spaces.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know where this
My
open-
understanding is that somebody has suggested that South River Street should be turned into an open space, no residential.
No.
That's what's going on. That's why I'm trying to get the connection here.
That's when, you know, rumor outweighs fact, and you know, that is a rumor that we're trying to turn South River Street into an open space. What we're trying to do is protect South River Street to be a residential zone consistent with the way it has been for the past 50 years, 75 years, 150 years. What we don't want to do is have people being able to put industrial buildings there, you know, big, you know, complexes there. You know, we want to maintain that character of that building, and that's really what we're trying to protect. I think that, you know, there's a misnomer here where a rumor starts and then all of a sudden it just becomes an avalanche, and the rumor has no, you know, basis on fact as to what we're trying to do. And I think that's what's happening is that someone started a rumor that, oh, it's open space and we're going to take everybody's house away from them. That's the furthest from the truth. So I think that
That's probably due to the fact of the communication problem.
Right.
But I
Well, that's what I'm saying is
I hear
that, you know,
Great.
and that's what I'm
great to
saying is
hear.
that you have to attend
Do
those
me a
meetings.
favor and perhaps go upstairs tomorrow and get a copy of what we're talking about. No, that's only part
Not this one?
of it. That's
okay.
only part of
No, I'll do my homework. It's just, you know, this was the
because
first
this
day I found
extends-
out about this stuff, and
this
you start hearing
extends
open
from
space.
Lafayette Street.
'Cause there was a couple of years ago, you remember they wanted to do the bike path on South River Street and put up those 5-story condos. I'm thinking maybe, you know, somebody's trying to wiggle that back in there somehow. So I figured, let me go find out what's going on.
In some cases, yes.
Oh, great. Then we're both on the same size then, if that's what your purpose is. Great. I'm sorry I took up so much of your time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Administrative approval, we've made a change in the motion, if you recall, and we're going to take administrative approval for SPR 1750 at this time. Is she here? Good.
The applicant is here in the,
Welcome. We didn't wish to keep you here, and we know of what you have, so if you wish to, give your name and address, please.
Michelle Flanagan, 11 Michael Drive.
All right. And what it is you wish to do?
So I want to open up a salon at the Hazardville Hotel, 316 Hazard Ave on the left side.
I was wrong.
I know that there are, it's an old building and I want to keep it to be as, you know, I love it. I think it's a really cool building. So I want to keep it as, you know, as similar as possible. And I just think it'd be a really great area because it is in such a, you know, I love the style of Hazardville, so I think it would be really cool to have something cool down there. And I know that we have, there are a few other salons in the area, but I think that me being, I'm 25, and I think that me being young, bringing young people don't feel so, like they have to go somewhere that's, you know, that they have to feel so nervous about going to. I work in East Windsor currently, and I do have a large clientele. I'm from Enfield, so a lot of the girls that I do are from Enfield, and they love coming to me. I like, you know, making them feel good about themselves, and I feel like that's really important.
Sir, we're holding a meeting, please. If you wish to go and talk, go outside and continue.
What will
Questions?
what will your hours and days be so the public will know?
So they're going to be Tuesday through Saturday. Every day, it's kind of a little different. It just depends on people's schedules. During the week, we open a little bit later because we stay open a little bit later, typically between 10 and 8, depending on clients. Right now, my schedule is a little bit different every day because I like to, come in when clients need, and I squeeze them in, and I come in early, I stay late, make people happy when they can. And, everyone kind of works different hours, so you have to kind of wiggle with it. But also on Fridays and Saturdays, we will be 9 to 3, I believe. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
How many people are going to be working there?
To start, two or three, and then within hopefully 3 months to have 4 to 6. It's not a huge area, so I don't want to have too many people in there, but everyone, a lot of the times that I'm working, I'm not working with somebody else, and then they come in and I leave early, so there's not going to be too much racket going on in there, but my clientele I have almost 100% clientele as of right now, so I would like to be able to, give those people that can't get into me to my employees, so that they can, have.
Are you also going to do nails there?
No, it's just strictly hair, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any more?
No, I just want to make a comment that I did, look at that hotel recently, and I did notice that both of the I guess offices that were available there, or shops that were available there, were vacant, and I did think to myself, what a shame that there isn't something going in there. So I am very happy to see that something is going in there, because that area can support quite a bit of traffic.
I think it's really, for myself, I've lived here my entire life, and I love that area. I love the old style buildings and whatnot down there. So me being only 25, I think I have a long time to, expand and make that my spot. And I think that would be awesome to have people know and feel comfortable, just coming down there. And I know the owner of the building feels the same exact way. He's a great guy, so I think that we kind of have the same insights.
Okay, any further questions? The motion would be then to allow administrative approval because there's material that they'd have to do.
I make a motion, we allow administrative approval for SPR 1750.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? No abstentions, unanimous. Welcome to Enfield and Hazardville Center.
Thank you.
Okay. Public hearings, 2915 Elm Street. Special permit. There is a letter. Request for hearing extension. I hereby request Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission, Inland Wetlands Commission. I'm sorry, I'm reading the whole thing. Planning and Zoning Commission. A grant extension of statutory time to complete the public hearing on PH 2915 until August 16th, 2018. Is that the next date, 16? I thought it was 19.
No, he provided just a 35-day extension instead of just an extension to the next meeting. So.
So a motion is in order to.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we table, public hearing 2915 to our next meeting of July 19th.
Second.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would ask that the staff ask the applicant to have an actual business going into that spot if we're going to do that.
We talked to the applicant, and he said that he does have a business in mind. So we told him to give us
One
a
that
new
he could
narrative.
share with us.
Yeah, we told him to give us a new narrative, and I think he's working on some site reconfiguration stuff with like parking and driveways and stuff. So.
Okay.
Because we probably won't approve it blank. That's why.
No, that's true.
Yeah, we let him
All
know
in
that.
favor, extension, unanimous. Let's see, public hearing 2909 zoning text change. Application for a new regulation, section 4.90, large flexible residential. Secretary, please take the roll and read the, I'm sorry, it's a continuation.
Charles Durin.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis. Here. Virginia Higley.
Here.
Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar.
Here.
And Richard Suzak is here.
Welcome, gentlemen. Again, routine for name and address for the record.
Frank Troiano.
That's
Put an
bad.
arrow on there. This up.
Frank
This
Troiano
one,
with Enfield Properties.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Attorney Paul Smith, 27 South Main Street, Windsor Locks, representing the applicant. Since the hearing we had in June, several weeks back, we did meet with staff. We looked at all the comments that were made by the commissioners at the prior hearing, and what you should, I think, have in your package, because we hopefully timely submitted it to staff, was a revised zoning text amendment. I think I gave you both a red, what we call a red line, which is showing the changes, and a clean copy. I'm just going to briefly go over the highlights of what we did.
Right, they have the date of July 5th, 2018, is stamped in the office.
Okay, so that would be the one. And I'm just going to go over them sort of rather quickly. We did, as you can see at the top, renumber this and make it part of 4.70, the 4.70 scheme, which the commission had suggested, instead of making it a separate 4.90 section. So now all of the 470 requirements that are in sections 1, 2, and 3 of 470, 4.70, 1, 2, and 3, and 9.20 have to be met as part of the process. And that's actually described in C. So those two changes, and actually at the end of the proposed change, we revised 4.70, where we just included large flexible residential housing as one of the types of housing that falls under the 470 requirements. So that sort of should close that issue. The second thing was we looked at and have provided schematically that this be located in the I-91 corridor, and we define that corridor basically as 1 mile and within 1 mile of the right-of-way lines or boundary lines of I-91. We provided a map, and that's it's the exact same map. It's blown up. The sort of the line in the middle of the blue hatchway is I-91, and then the hatching on either side of it is 1 mile. You can see it pretty much encompasses from the west all the way to the river, so all the way to the boundary line of Enfield, and to the right it goes in, 1 mile from the right-of-way. So, approximately maybe 1/3, 2/3 of the town is now, 2/3 to 3/4 of the town has been eliminated from eligibility to cite one of these things. It would have to be within that I-91 corridor. So that seemed to be a concern of the commission. We addressed it. It certainly reduces the number of potential sites. There may have been some sites along 190 going east out towards Summers that you may have been able to cite it that might have met the criteria. Those would be eliminated. Also, flipping over to page 2, we did remove section 4 and 5 because those were part of the 470 requirements, so we wanted to avoid redundancies, and we took number 5 and stuck it back into the number of criteria that you had set out, and we said that we had to have at least 4 of those range of amenities. We did, at the Commission's recommendation, include a community building or space. And the reason we put it that way is sometimes the community space is inside one of the apartment complex units. So it's, again, when you ultimately go to a special use permit, an applicant would come in and say, this is what we're proposing, and there's a discussion as to whether or not you're satisfied that that's, is that adequate space? Is it reasonable? Is someone proposing 1,000 square feet when that's given the size of the complex rationally not adequate? So then you look to other criteria, or you want more. So we did that. Added the clubhouse. We did look at former section 9, which is now 7, which is the buffer area. We looked at all kinds of sort of issues with that. The way we had it worded, the commission actually determines the adequacy of the buffer area looking into what exists in the regulations, but you're not bound by that. You may decide on a case-by-case basis that you want a larger buffer area, but we knew there was a concern about closeness of buildings, especially with regard to single-family homes. So a provision that we have seen in other regulations, we've seen them in Avon, a couple other places, is that you put a definitive limit, which is, in this case, no building can be located, and that's either, it could be units, it could be a garage, it could be the clubhouse, whatever it is, no building can be located within 100 feet of an existing single-family home. So as a matter of practicality, there has to be at least a separation of distance of 100 feet between an existing home and where you were going to site a building. In addition to that, the commission would then look at what kind of buffers are adequate given what you're building, what's being proposed versus what exists for single-family homes. I actually went out and looked at the Mayfield property and looked at the issues there, and really the main one that I saw is coming in, there were a couple homes that had very, very small buffers very close to the homes, but
that's the one that we've been talking
yeah,
about.
but unfortunately, I mean, in that case, it looks to me like the house itself probably doesn't have what would be an adequate side yard today or rear yard, just because when it was constructed, it was a lot that probably pre-existed zoning. So it's really tight there. This regulation, actually, that wouldn't qualify because I don't think there's a 100-foot distance between those buildings. So it's again, it's a minimum. It's not a maximum. So it's a starting point. It may not be an end point given the plan you look at in the decision-making process. We looked at on-site storage in 11, which is now 9, and there were 2 things we sort of addressed. One is sort of implied, but we put it in there. One is that it would be reasonable storage, meaning there was a concern that, maybe, we'd say here's a closet with, 100, 30 square feet of storage or something, or 30 inches or whatever. And so it's got to be reasonable. And again, that's the commission's judgment to a certain degree. An applicant comes in and says, this is what we're proposing for storage. You have to decide whether you think under all circumstances is reasonable or adequate.
Do you think that, if we put a percentage of the unit area as a reasonable storage, the thing is, because obviously what we're looking at is the size of the units also, so that, it might be conceivable that, a 7% or 10%, range would be acceptable, and obviously there has to be enough space to store either large pieces of furniture or excess furniture that somebody might have.
Yeah,
so.
that's actually, in my mind and in my experience, not the point, but I would say this. That sort of fixed percentage doesn't really work very well. And what I mean by that is if you have a significantly large units that you're building, the real need for any storage goes down. And the storage needs that we're talking about aren't for furniture. It's not to store a boat. It's not to store extra, because somebody has, 3 ATVs. That's not the kind of storage you look at as reasonable and rationally when you're trying to do a complex. You're looking at people that might want to store some clothes or, Christmas decorations, that sort of thing. You're not looking for sort of large storage areas where people are going to store, I downsized from, 6 rooms of furniture to 3, so I want to store 3 rooms of furniture somewhere. That's not a rational approach to this. And frankly, you even find we found in some complexes that where you have garages, people are really using garages to store things like boats and stuff like that. And it's not really intentionally the purpose. So it's not to provide sort of large storage areas for units. It's not. If someone has 2 rooms of furniture that they need to store, then they really need to look at the idea of going, to one of these rental companies that rents dead storage or something. It's not designed to be for large bulk storage. It's just not. And I've never seen sort of units developed with that concept because it doesn't work very well. And it's not the design where you want somebody who has a unit there to say, I got all this storage space, let me, have people store stuff there. It's not meant to be that either. It's designed really to work for the unit. And I would suggest, again, in the site plan phase, you really look at that and say, okay, to your point, given the size of the unit, given how the units are configured, is the storage they're proposing rational and reasonable under the circumstances? And that's sort of a judgment that you all have to make, and you have to hear the arguments from the developers to why it is, a rational idea to have X number of square feet of storage for these units, right? And you may disagree, and you may say, no, I think we need more, and here's why, and that's a conversation. But at the end of the day, I think to sort of try to just numerically put a percentage on it doesn't. First of all, as units get larger, there's an argument you probably need less storage space, right? Because I'm giving you a very large unit, right? There's a lot of space, and so your demand for sort of percentage-wise just to me doesn't work very well. But again, a discussion. We did modify the sidewalk requirement that says sidewalk shall be required, not as required. We eliminated 15 and 16 because, again, they're in 470. So, again, we try to avoid redundancy. If it's in 470, we don't want to recite it in this and create some sort of level of confusion. Because an impact analysis is required, a site plan is required to show all those things. We did, with regard to design standards, make 2 changes. One with regard to density, there was a discussion that you would like to have it limited to developable acres, and we inserted that as a condition of approval, that the density is on developable acres, not per acre. So it's per developable acre versus per acre. And we did reduce the maximum lot coverage from 40 to 30%. There was some discussion about where it should be, but you felt it should be reduced somewhat, so we did do that. So those are the changes we kind of looked at and wrestled with a bit. I mean, the one that gave us sort of the most discussion and looked at and sort of researched a bit was, again, this idea of buffers and closeness of units, and how do you rationally protect existing residences. I would say at the end of the day, this is a good concept. It's then up to any developer who comes in with a plan to propose to zone within this district to do a flexible residential housing, large flexible residential housing plan is to come in with a special use plan that sort of addresses all these things. But at the same time, the commission has actually fairly broad latitude in the language of this section and in the language of 470 to say, okay, this works, it doesn't work, we're happy with it, no, it's not, it's too close to homes, it's fine, and all those other things, including, is the design appropriate? So we felt like we took the majority of concerns that the commission has had and addressed them. So we're certainly happy to answer any questions or amplify any of the changes we've made to date.
So I just want to thank the applicant and council for all the changes that were made. It's clear that you've listened intently to many, if not most, of the comments that we've had over the past however many times it's been before us. And so thank you very much for taking all of our comments into consideration. I think this is a very good draft. I do have still a few items that I would want included that we had discussed at prior meetings. The first is we had discussed, or I think someone had brought up, that streets within the residential housing area may be public or private, but in either case they should be constructed to the standards of the subdivision regulations. That would just be to make sure that any internal streets are wide enough, safe enough, and that's consistent with the other multifamily housing regulations we have, for example, in 4.40.4. So that's sort of one thing, is just to make sure that the internal streets are, if there are any, I mean, it really just depends on how big the parcel is, but it does have to be fairly big. The next, unless you had a comment on that.
I don't know, are you saying that if we want to create a public street, which, I mean, you could do in one of these things, then it would, by its very nature, have to be,
sure,
it'd have to meet standards. In other words, you don't accept streets that,
right.
They would have to.
So we wouldn't have to. If you're suggesting within the complex, I mean, it gets difficult in the sense that if you're suggesting within the complex, because there may be driveways. Mayfield's a perfect example, I suppose. If you go in there, there's lots of parking areas, driveways. None of those, obviously, none of the driveway entrances would meet the standard to a public street. By very definition of we're proposing a street, we have to meet the standard.
Right.
Otherwise, you won't accept it as a street.
I guess this would be in the situation if it's a private street. So obviously, if it were a public street, it would have to meet standards. But I'm only reading from the regulations that we currently have in 4.40.4. I don't, as a practical matter, I assume the streets would be wide enough and in the condition we need them to be. But if it's a private street,
right. Again, I think ultimately, I mean, you sort of do what you want, I guess. But ultimately, I think what would happen again is, if I were coming in with a PUD, for example, that had a street, right? Question for you guys as part of the special use permit, are you satisfied with whatever I'm proposing in terms of standard? Is it wide enough? You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're really talking about. Private street, building would want it built to a certain standard so it's safe, okay? It might not be built, if it's private, to the standard of a public roadway in terms of depth of pavement and all that stuff. But because it's a private street, not principally your concern, as long as it's built, you know what I'm saying, to a certain health and safety standard, right?
Well, I mean,
if we're talking public, then we have to obviously meet a criteria that they would accept it as a road, right? And
right,
engineering then looks at it and says, do you have
engineering does it?
Right. Do you have depth of pavement? Do you have depth of gravel? Do you have the proper drainage for us to accept it, right? Because you're then assuming liability, maintenance, and so forth. So I'm not. That seems to me sort of self-correcting, but
Fire department accessibility as well.
right, all that stuff.
Again, the comparison was not make a private street the same as a public street. The comparison was, if it's a private street, it conforms to the subdivision regulation street requirements that we have.
But is that a subdivision? It's an apartment.
Yeah.
Right, but in 4.40.4, there's H. We have that same requirement for not a subdivision. And the purpose of it is if there's going to be a parcel that's large enough to require an internal street, and if that internal street will not end up being a public one, you'd want it still to be, or at least the commission or the text or the purpose of the regulation is to make sure it's still a street that is passable in the right ways pursuant to our subdivision regulations.
Yeah, you're looking at the senior residential development.
Right.
Which is sort of, if you will, a type of PUD where you have basically private residence on a street. So the concern there was when you do that, we want to make sure your private street has the width and whatever of a public street. Again, I think for this, because it's a much broader context, you may require that given what the design is. You know, you may say if you're planning individual units, even though it's multifamily tighter units, but it's basically a planned unit development, right? Then you're going to have to be satisfied that whatever we're designing in terms of streets are wide enough, you know, in terms of safety of passage and all that stuff. So I'm not sure.
When you go to your first ART before you get approved,
Right.
The fire and police won't approve it if it's too narrow, regardless of what you call it.
Right.
Private, public, driveway. It
Yes.
just won't
So
be.
I just look at it as self-correcting is what I'm saying, because even if you have private driveways that aren't streets, again, fire looks at all that stuff like, can we get access to these units? Can we get access? And if you have, my understanding is if you have a multifamily building, and that's our concept, that they're very concerned that they be able to get around that whole building, right?
Absolutely. They require total access.
Total access at all points, given, you know, you've got 20 units in the building,
And
right?
they check the turning radius.
Yeah,
I think this is all well taken. I just think by reading these, this does not preclude the same type of development as in the PUD. In other words, it doesn't have to be one giant building that would be built under this section. It would include individual units as well.
Yeah.
And so to the extent it would, you know, maybe the concerns would be addressed by ART. It's just a comment that I had on for discussion.
I'm sorry. Go
I
ahead.
have another comment. I'm looking at your building height, and nowhere in 4.70 does it say it says 35 feet, not to exceed 35 feet, and you're asking for 45 feet in your...
Yeah, what we did with regard to...
I have an issue with that extra 10 feet if we're not allowing it in other areas to allow it in this area. So that's my personal concern. Yeah, I mean, that's just, I mean, if we're not allowing it in other areas, I have an issue saying, oh, because this is a transitional area, we can do it.
Right. As you can see, what we did with building height actually is we did 3 occupied stories, but we went higher with the actual height of the building so that it's really a design feature. In other words, we can't go over 3 stories, but at that point you want to design something that's hopefully architecturally attractive and pleasing. And so the reason for that height is to allow, if you will, if you want to put peaked roofs or cupolas or things like that. So that's really the theory behind it. And it is actually a height we've seen, I think, in other parts of the regs.
It's not in 4.70 at all. So it says 35 feet.
It's an approved design that we already have.
Yeah, I mean, we had a design actually approved with that, so under one of the sections that actually tailors into 4.70. So, I mean, it just, again, we're obviously looking at creating some density, and trying to do it in a way that's that's attractive. So you try to sort of give some leeway in terms of how high your building is to develop good roof lines and that sort of thing. It's not like, because we can't really go over the 3-story. It's not so you can add more stories, right? It's so you can, utilize some design features. The real thing I usually think of is peak roofs, some cupolas, that sort of thing.
That's why right there.
I understand you're not having basements, and we require basements in other multifamily housing.
Right.
But I still, if we're doing 35 as a standard, and this is only my opinion,
I
it's not
understand.
necessarily the rest of the boards. So.
I appreciate that.
One more comment.
Let her finish, please.
Sorry.
I'm done.
Okay.
So another major concern of mine is the open space paragraph, so new paragraph 8. I had a concern the last time, as did a member of the public, that areas with greater than 15% slope or wetland soils should not count towards meeting the minimum open space requirement. That suggestion didn't make it into this new draft, and I would definitely want that in there.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
So this is on the open space and what types of soils and.
Right, okay.
So, I'm sorry, new paragraph 8, I guess. And I would want to insert a sentence that says areas with greater than 15% slope or wetland soils as identified by a certified soil scientist shall not count towards meeting this minimum open space requirement. And that's consistent with our other open space regulations when we have these kinds of developments. And that's to avoid a scenario that we've seen before where the essentially unusable land is counted as open space, and then it serves no purpose at all because the public doesn't really enjoy it.
Yeah, again, we sort of looked at that, and again, when you're looking at, arguably, when you take developable acres, you sort of take that into consideration. And I look at open space as sort of a mix in this sense. Not all sites that have wetland soils, that doesn't automatically mean they're not usable or not or can't be used as open space, or because some of that, frankly, can be sort of a lawn. Okay, it may be wetland soils, but it's, you know what I'm saying, it's not swampland either. It could be that, but so again, I think there's a minimum requirement that you have to meet. And again, we've sort of tried to address that to a certain degree in limiting developable acres.
The only thing you do have is a walking or hiking trail, and that would fit down through there. In fact, I believe that's what we allowed at the one up on North Maple Street.
Well, so then maybe a compromise on that is areas with greater than 15% slope shall not count. And if you want to try to...
slope is different.
Right, the slope is a major concern. Now, the wetland soils, maybe that's something that the commission would consider not including. But the slope is a major problem if you want to count it as usable open space, usable being
Well,
by
I
a
think
member of the
that's
public.
the key, is usable, but that's up to your decision when the plan would come in. If you see that it's a ravine,
Right.
That's what they're talking about. We accepted too many ravines in past history.
Right, and
why not have that be something that is calculated for us, insofar as it's something that says 15% slope or not, and then you just can automatically.
I don't know if you need to put it in here, but when they come in with an application, you'd be able to.
It's in our
pick it
other
up.
regulations.
The only concern that I have is that, the thing is, you can have wetland soils that are, or you can have wetland soils that are not wet most of the time, but then there's wetland soils that are wet most of the time. So, what we need to really differentiate is the fact that, if there's an area that is significantly wet for most of the year, then that would not qualify as open space.
Again, if it's wetlands, it'd have to go to the wetlands agency, and they'd have to approve whatever they're going to do on it. Without then we'd have no say
Well, they would
on it,
approve
period.
it because if it's being counted as open space, wetlands is going to be great with that.
But if wetlands pulls it out, well, if you say it can't be used for that, they can't count it in.
As passive open space?
if the wetlands, if they come in and they want to calculate it as part of their open space, and wetland says you can't use it for, well, you got a list of items here, you can't use it for this, what you want to use it for, they won't be able to use it. Wetlands controls that.
Yeah, listen, it's not our intent to try to sort of do steep slopes as open space,
but
but
wetlands first, and they'd say yes, you can have horseshoes out on that, or you can't.
But that's if you're built, I guess I'm not quite understanding, because that's if you're doing something to that wetlands area, and I'm sure there's a review area above that, but wetlands doesn't tell us what is usable as open space. We decide what's usable as open space.
Yeah.
Wetlands wouldn't say, sorry, PZC, you can't count that as open space, or you can count that as open space.
I think the key here is wetlands are soil-based, so you can look at the soil on the ground and say, oh, that's not a wetland because you don't necessarily see that it's wet, but it is because that's what the soil is. So I think what they're trying to say is like maybe don't preclude all like wetland soils from that so that you're not like...
Yeah. I think that makes some sense, but I would still want the 15% graded area being excluded from a calculation of open space because that's unusable to the public.
No, that
And I
makes
think
sense.
that's what we discussed, at least many of the commission members discussed that at a prior meeting as well as a member of the public.
that's fine. We can add that. It's not our intent to try to sort of, count some sort of steep
I
slope.
think what they're worried about is the fact that Commissioner Nelson brought up about the town has been getting a lot of land that's
Right.
not good for anything as open space.
Right, we're not.
So we're stuck
yeah.
with bad land, and
Right,
that's what it.
Yeah,
But
this
that's how
open
you
space
have
concept isn't for open space for the town. It's really, do we have some open space so that in terms of density and what people can sort of use that live there. It's not, this isn't town open space. Not that you define it maybe differently in your regs, because I don't think you do. But it's not meant to go to the town, is what I'm saying. This is meant to stay within the ownership of the complex.
That's right. And some
so we're
places we
talking two
require you
different
give it
horses
to
here.
a conservation
Right.
group, as
But-
we've done that to
But we certainly, again, we're not trying to sort of foist some sort of, steep slopes
villages.
exception, so we're certainly happy to add that.
Stays with the owners.
And please understand, we know that Mr. Triano will build a nice area.
Listen,
but
we're
this-
designing
we
a
have to
regulation
think
for every-
about
right,
the
of
people
course.
that come after, and
Absolutely,
they may not want
Yeah,
to.
it's not our kind of first rodeo, so we
Right,
get
so
it. This
we're
is,
trying to
this is a
be-
text change, it's not a,
But
a
it's-
site
it's
plan
also-
approval,
It's all
so.
up to the commission on what kind of land they accept
Right.
as open space anyway.
Right, I mean,
That's right.
ultimately, I would say, if you looked at something, language or no, and I'm happy to put it in, and you just don't like the character of what's proposed, this type of special use permit regulation and the way it's written the commission has extremely wide latitude and to say, no, we're
Yeah,
just
you
not
can put
comfortable.
yourself in a box too. By
Right.
getting too.
So I want you to have leeway. I know it's always a concern. Someone does a lot of work and submits, and you feel compelled. You know what I'm saying? But the town's process here is you go to an ART, you go through planning, you go to everybody, and you sort of get input, right? And if people are like, well, this doesn't work very well, then if you bring it to the commission, then you bring it at your peril, is the way we look at it. I mean, you'd rather have favorable reports from police and fire and from staff, planning staff, and so forth, and wetlands. You don't have to. They can say, we think this is a lousy project, and we still can bring it forward. There's no rule about that. But obviously, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that as a practical matter. You're guided by your staff, and as you should be. And we have these ARTs for a specific reason, because we're trying to address, their real concerns. So, again, happy to add the steep slope requirement under, I guess it's now Section 8, right?
Yep.
Oh, what are you doing? Because if I'm thinking there is a slope upwards at that North Maple Street development. it goes uphill, their pathway. And I don't know how you take care of that. I mean, if you're talking gullies, that's another thing. That's why I say it's, you're on a special use permit.
Right. I mean, our vision was more leeway to the commission. You decide whether you like what we're planning. If you don't, then, you don't obviously approve it. May not make us happy or may not make the next applicant happy. But if you don't think it functions well, you know what I'm saying, that you're not, that the open space is underwater, or, you know what I'm saying, I get it.
That's why you make.
But sometimes it's difficult when you don't necessarily get specific enough to actually, create a reason why you don't want something. At least if it's in writing, it's easier to defend. If it's just, a personal preference, then all of a sudden it's more difficult to defend. So in that sense, I think that, our intention is that, we have, we don't have, significantly wet areas as designated as and I think that's what everybody's saying is in recognizing that there are wetland soils, redoxomorphic features that are noticeable in the soils that are not necessarily totally wet a majority of the time of the year, but there are other areas that are definitely wet most of the time of the year, and those kind of features should not be, allowed as, open space. But I think that, sometimes it's just easier to defend those kind of things, and I'm not sure if it's, a matter of saying, wetlands that are, constantly wet should not be considered as open space, but wetlands that, and then again, I think that according to Jen and according to most wetland scientists, something doesn't have to be wet to be wetland soils, but,
right.
The thing is, I think that everybody envisions wetland soils as being wet, and I think that that's what this commission envisions wetland soils as being, saturated, most of the period, most of the time of the year. So,
yeah. Doesn't work that way.
But as a special use permit, we aren't going to let them put a tennis court in the middle of a pond.
No, that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
If it's wet all the time, we're not going to let them put a facility there.
As a practical matter, all of our goals here are aligning, right? As Attorney Smith is saying, they're not going to advance a proposal that says a steep cliff that drops off to nowhere would count. However, looking at 40.70.6F from our own regulations, we have a provision that says you don't count open space that has a 15% slope or more, including that wetland soil requirement. Now, if we want to change the wetland soil requirement to say, in my opinion, what I would do is I would say areas with greater than 15% slope shall not count. Wetland soil may count in the discretion of the commission, so long as the commission, but I don't know. I mean, that's just something we already have in our regulations. As a practical matter, it probably aligns, but I would still want that to be included.
You can't delegate what they can use wetlands.
Right.
Wetlands does that.
That's right. That's what I keep saying.
You also have under 4.70.4, letter C, for open space subdivisions, you allow a minimum of 33% of the area of the open space shall not be encumbered by wetlands, floodplains, or steep slopes equal to or greater than 15%. So you also have another thing that allows some wetlands, but 33% definitely can't be wetlands. So I don't know if that's something you just want to take into consideration as another thing you have in your regulations already.
I mean, if you got a pond on the lake and you want to use that for open space and use it for fishing.
But you don't want to put a tennis court on it.
I guess, at the end of the day, we would leave it to the discretion of the commission to decide whether
use it SPR.
the open space is adequate or not as part of the special use. I mean,
plus they're not giving it to the town, which is what that ordinance is about.
Right.
Town doesn't want any wetland,
but I guess
like that.
the suggestion is that open space doesn't have to be an activity or a structure that is built on. It can be passive open space. Right. And so in the scenario where passive open space is still not accessible or usable by even a member or resident in that multifamily housing area, then it's not useful. And it's just a way to get rid of your undesirable property and still count towards open space. So that's why we have that requirement in there.
if you want to. So what do you want to do, beat it to death, or are we going to?
I do have one question for staff. The agenda states that must close public hearing was July 7th on this one.
Can't be right.
What?
I think that was a cut and paste typo because we definitely didn't.
Yeah, we
do that. I think the mandatory
Right.
open public hearing was probably July 7th, and we changed it to closed without changing the date.
And so what is the date of the must close?
calculate it. What's it, 40, 45?
It's August.
35, right?
Because this was before the commission as of June, at least in the last meeting, regular meeting we had, so it had to have been several weeks before that, that you applied again.
Yeah, we,
We're on wetlands. Oh, no, we're for the June application.
By my count, it's July 26th.
Okay.
Is the closed public hearing date.
Next meeting is the 19th.
We're safe.
Good.
All right, well, I don't know, you want to determine what you want to do with this or not. I mean, I think you control it with the SPR, but and you tighten up too much, and you, as he says, you don't have any leeway for yourself.
Well, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me about the height.
Height,
I agree with you on
I
that.
think it should be maintained.
Yeah.
But that's also the median height.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of
understand that.
that's an average roof height. So, I think that, if we're talking about, cupolas or things like that, that just adds some architectural features, not
Well,
an average roof height.
I don't think so, though, because the way that this one is worded is unlike the other way in our regulations. It says 3 occupied stories not to exceed 45. And so ordinarily it says just not to exceed 45 feet, and then we would interpret it to be, roof area. But they're saying the occupied stories doesn't exceed 45, and who knows if the roof has to go above that.
No, it's 3 occupied.
Occupied stories?
Yeah, stories. Right.
Elsewhere in the-
You can't have 4. I mean, the point is not to go higher.
Right.
In occupied stories. Point of
So
it.
if they went 3 stories, the building
Ends at 45, no roof.
Maximum.
No roof above that.
The storage would be the 3rd floor if you didn't have a,
Our design is actually to store it, there's a storage area above the third.
above the 3rd.
Occupied.
Yeah, that was from the
Right.
design work that we did for the
And it's
approved
not a full
apartments that we already
story.
have.
In other words, it's not designed to be a full story.
Because ordinarily the regulations just say maximum building height 35, and this is
So
suggesting
you,
occupied
ins-
stories to 45 and
We're
building height
inserting
above that.
building, 3 occupied stories, building not to exceed 45 feet.
I believe that's correct.
Yes.
So you want to insert the word building in there, which makes it more definitive.
Should we say roof line not to exceed 45 feet?
Why don't we just do it like we do elsewhere in the regulations, delete the occupied stories and just
I
say
agree.
building height not to exceed 35 or 45, whatever you want it to be.
I agree. To be
That's the way consistent with our other.
our regulations.
I mean, again, what we're trying to do is
I
sort
understand
of.
what you're trying to do, but I'm one of those consistent people. It's here, it's here, it's here.
I understand it, but I guess what I get concerned about is we can look at all the other regulations and sort of pick and choose between them. The idea, again, is to give any developer some flexibility, and then at the end of the day, if you don't like it, if you think it's too high comparative to where it's located and its view or how it impacts the abutting residential area, then, you deny it, and we have to sort of retool it.
Just take the height out, just call it 3 occupied stories.
Yeah, I mean,
Why mess around with
the other thing we did is said, allow us 3 occupied stories, and then, we have to sort of convince you whatever our design is works, I mean, that's what we sort of started out with when we met with staff. They're the ones, I think, that came up with sort
Actually,
of.
they got the 15 degrees in here already on 16 areas of steep slope. 15 degrees or greater.
Yeah,
Where?
That's here, but not in theirs.
It is theirs.
That is theirs?
What are we talking
Is that an
about
old
now?
one?
No, I'm sorry.
You're in the wrong one.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't have a problem with 45 feet and 3 occupied floors as this is stated. I can understand the need for the flexibility with the construction. If there's going to be construction with no basement, that attic space could be useful as long as it's not an occupied space. So I think having 45 as a maximum is fine, and we can use that, our discretion, in future applications.
Well, you also, depending on the soil, are limiting where buildings can be built with the amount of soil that is wet in the area. So you may have to do slab construction on deep footings.
Right.
In fact, around this basin. Because if you recall, this is way back in ancient history, was a lake here. Taylor Road was the what do you call it? The edge of the lake.
I mean, the story height that, if you look at some of your regs, usually has some mechanism to adjust it upward if you can show it's compatible with the existing, neighborhood and so forth. And so we sort of tried to stay away from that and said, look, here's the maximum. It probably is no one would want to go beyond 3 occupied stories or 45 feet. So that's sort of what we took as a max. But ultimately, you have latitude under the regulations to make sure, as we've defined it, that it's compatible with what's around it, that it works in terms of height and so forth. So again, I sort of get the angst is you're trying to do sort of too much in the reg and not enough in the special use, where you sort of just want to be able to check the boxes and say, okay, and it's not designed to be that. It's designed to be, this is what we think works. You go through a process, and at the end of the day, you may not think it works. And so, it's back to the drawing board sort of thing. I think what we have works well, and again, if you were to start to look at reducing stories or heights, then you really go back to, okay, well then give us some flexibility, as you do in other parts of the regs, to show that we can, go a little higher and meet the requirements. Here, what we said is, look, you have to be convinced that what we're proposing is compatible. If it's not, if you don't think it is because it's too high, and it looms over the existing property, and I you mentioned that, Commissioner DeGray, at the last thing, and that's why I went out and actually looked just to, see what your concern was. And it is, that corner thing is pretty ugly. And, again, maybe on paper it looked better. You know what I'm saying? Maybe on the maps, when the commission looked at it, it looks better. I don't think we'll be proposing anything that looks that, horrific. And one never knows, but I don't think so. And my expectation is, if we did, that probably the majority of the commissioners would be opposed to it, frankly, which they're entitled to be under the regs. So again, I think we're sort of just nitpicking at stuff that I think the developer needs some latitude, and then it's our burden then to carry it forward. So I guess we feel like we're pretty good with what we have, unless you have.
So basically what we're saying is that the roof ridge could never exceed 45 feet? Is that really what our, interpretation of this section is?
I don't think as it's drafted, no. It doesn't read like
Because I think that, if that's what we're saying, then I would not object to 45 feet if the ridge of the roof is, or nothing can project above that in terms of, in standard construction, that would be consistent with, again, a first floor, a slab on grade, an elevated second floor, and an elevated third floor.
I think to accomplish that, you would delete 3 occupied stories and just say building height not to exceed 45 feet.
Right, right. And I think that, and the building ridge height not to exceed 45 feet.
That's
And how many stories you can fit in that 45 feet to ridge line?
No, no.
No?
Our vision was no part of the building would be higher than 45 feet.
But then you can put a building with a flat roof up there, right?
But because it says stop. It says 3 stories, right? It says 3 stories. So if I were going to build a 4-story building that I can't occupy the 4th story, what kind of sense would that make?
Yeah, but like you're saying, you can put storage up there, and then all of a sudden, you could have this, monstrosity of a building.
Right, and then at that point, you would, I guess, look at me and say, you're crazy. You've built this 45-foot flat roof building with a whole floor that you can't use.
Well, you are using it because you're using it for storage. Well, and maybe mechanical systems and other things. And
It's very difficult to come to that conclusion when the remainder of our building height
Can we
requirements.
do one person at a time, please?
What is that?
Sorry, I thought I spoke after. Okay. When the rest of our regulations say maximum building height is a number,
Yeah, but he's still saying what you're going to do.
that's what it is.
build this
And so when you say
box.
occupied stories is a number, then you can presumably go above that because then you have non-occupied stories, and that's not that number. So I don't know why we would change the regime for our regulations just to say 3 occupied stories when the remainder do not.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you want to say
No, that's
something?
Just not sure where we're going with it.
You can choose a height number to set. I think another thing to keep in mind is in section 3.30.8, you allow things like cupolas and chimneys and other architectural features on buildings to go higher than the allowable building height with your approval, with the commission's approval.
You have, right now, on the River Gateway, 2 areas. RG4, you're allowing 35 to 45. And on RG5, you're allowing 55. And on RG3, you're allowing 55. So I don't know.
Excuse me, respectively, those regulations have not been approved, so I don't think we can
No,
look at those.
no, well,
So
that's what you
At this point,
agreed
we're
with.
looking at this text, and we have to look at just this text now.
You're right, but you have to think of what you've already, which some of us were arguing against prior.
Well,
And I don't know, in one place, how you can be for something and in another be against.
Well, I think you can, though, because the River Gateway discussions we've been having are to encourage a more intensive use around the transit-oriented development. The reason why you'd have more density there is because you'd have people presumably using
We're
the
not
train.
talking density, we're talking height.
Well, height, and included in those regulations are increased density.
Yeah, there is.
And so we wanted that more intensive use, or would allow that more intensive use to allow for access to the train station and support development there, and particularly in
And height is going to do that.
but the way this zoning text changes before us, it's nowhere near any sort of community development. It's along the I-91 corridor as it's currently drafted. And so, in my opinion, the increased height in an area that's not near an area we're trying to support new development and a commercial center and a transit center, I think it's different.
I mean, at the end of the day, the idea that, the worst case scenario is we're going to somehow spend money and build a 4-story flat roof building and not occupy the top story and use it for storage is, you could take any part of the regulations and sort of reduce it to some sort of absurdity, and that's an absurdity, okay? It is because the cost of something like that would be, you'd basically be building an entire floor of a building, the most expensive part because it's the highest, for what? For like enormous storage for every building? I just don't understand it. And frankly, at the end of the day, if you didn't like it, you'd turn it down anyway. So it's somewhat confusing to me. I think we've asked for some flexibility because I think it's important. Our vision is to obviously do something where you have nice roof lines, you build a substantial building, but it has to be softened in some ways.
Could we state that the eave line has to start at a certain elevation in terms of, I'm just looking at, 3 stories. If we say 12 feet from floor to floor is more than reasonable for residential construction.
I'm sorry, 12?
12 feet from floor to floor. So basically, from the first floor to the second floor is 12. From the second floor to the third floor is 24. And then all of a sudden, from the third floor to a roof line would be another 10. So that roof line starts at, elevation 34. So now all of a sudden, I can't conceive that you would need something that would be 45 feet, other than the fact that, if the eave line is 34 feet, and you had a pitched roof, then all of a sudden, everything falls into place. And we can define that the eave line could not be higher than 35 feet. And then, I wouldn't have a problem at all with whatever you're going to do, because the eave line could never exceed 34 feet or 35 feet. So I think that would be consistent with our regulations. So, in that sense, we can say 3 occupied stories with an eave line no higher than 34 feet and a ridge line no higher than 45 feet. And then all of a sudden, we have control of the height of the building. And that's numerically sound.
Technically, it's beyond me, but
I like that approach better than the definition that's in the regulations now for building height.
Yes, right.
That messes around with mean heights of eaves.
Right.
and-
So I mean, if we say that, 3 stories with eve height no higher than 35 feet and a ridge height no higher than 45 feet, I think that's meeting, all of our concerns. And it sort of nips it into bud as to what we're talking about. But otherwise, it's just too vague.
It's wide
That's
open,
fine.
Yeah, that works.
That works
All right.
for us.
So
All right.
I'm good with that.
would you take out the 3 occupied or leave
Yes.
3 occupied?
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just,
it-
I got
Well, no,
lost,
because you wouldn't
though.
want to go
Okay,
beyond.
okay,
You
right.
don't want
okay.
to go beyond 3
Right. So we're
occupied
saying
floors.
3 occupied floors with an eve line no higher than 35 feet.
That would be right.
35.
And a ridge height no higher than 45 feet.
Right.
Right.
All right?
Clarifies the usage of each one.
Okay. So we got rid of that
Good,
one.
we got
But
rid
but
of
I
that
got
one.
some questions too.
Yeah, okay. Well, at least that one works nice. anyway.
Just needed,
Well, the first thing, the first thing, I think that what we do is we have to include this, large flexible residential housing in our table 4.10, because that defines, the parameters for all of the other, sections that we have there, and, we should include this section in that table also. I think it's on the first page. Or the second page. Yeah, it's the first page of section Article 4.
No, there's a bunch of different special uses that you don't put in there. I don't
No.
know if that's true, Jen, or not.
Well, the maximum.
Like the elderly housing.
Right, but
a lot
what
of
we
it.
do, I think that we're modeling this, under the MFHD, the multifamily, housing.
You kind of are. I'm not sure why it's there. I'm not sure why the MFHD is there. I really am not, because, I mean, you can certainly add it. I mean, that's a technical thing. And the reason I say that is I look down, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of 470 uses that aren't in this table. They're not. Now, I guess you all decided to put 470, the MFHD in there, but, there's some that you didn't. But listen, but at the end of the day, I think that's an easy fix, you just.
Okay, but
Staff's
I think that it would be
responsible. Yeah.
more or less consistent with
Sure.
our other multifamily, density housing system.
Yeah.
Because the other.
You know where to find that.
Right. Because the other thing
Something like
that
that.
I was looking at is the maximum impervious coverage in terms of, right now it's at 66%, which is, significantly higher than what I would expect. And in terms of, I wouldn't have a problem if it said 66% of developable area. versus 66% of the entire area. Because what we're looking at is we're looking at a 25-acre, system. And then all of a sudden, what we're saying is that 16 acres are you can have totally impervious coverage on 16 acres. If it's and then all of a sudden, if we had a third of that was wetlands, then all of a sudden you have 100% coverage on the developable area. So I think that what we don't want to do is have a big parking lot everywhere so that everything's covered with impervious surface, but that it's only we have some transitional areas between the wetlands and whatever might be there. So again, and if we used a third of that developable area as a transition runoff or retention basins or whatever you're going to need in order to collect all that water that's going to fall on that impervious area, that it would make more sense.
I'm just trying to sort of understand that in context of, we've already put a requirement in that the open space, I guess, is going to have some, accessibility or usability or something, right? I mean, you already said that.
In addition.
So I'm just not sure, I guess, Dave, that would be a question for you, how that works. I guess we'd have to really sort of, we looked at the maximum lot coverage because you raised it last time, and obviously we looked at, okay, what functionally works on our parcel or on any parcel, 25 acres. So we were able to reduce that. I just don't know. I'd have to look at how you define impervious coverage. I'd have to look at
Well, I think that
how it now.
Normally, lawn areas are not impervious coverage. I think that we're looking at hard surfaces in terms of, parking areas, roadways, building roofs, sidewalks.
Yeah, again, what we were doing is, as you guys were, we were looking at the MFHD, which basically by bringing it to 30, we brought it in compliance with that.
But I think your density is significantly higher than, the MHFD or
But they have maximum impervious coverage of 66% with less density, but still the maximum impervious coverage.
It goes,
so we're not increasing.
It goes to reason that they would be, because of the fact that as all of a sudden their parking, requirements are going to be significantly lower, and.
But why do they have 66% then?
Well, again, I'm not sure in terms of,
Well, no, what I'm saying is what we did based on our conversations is sort of bring this in line with what.
But I guess my concern is that if there's a significant area of wetlands associated with any particular, system or any particular parcel, is that all of a sudden you can get, almost 100% coverage of your developable area. And then that doesn't allow, at 66%, it's, 16 acres of impervious area. And that just seems like a lot to me.
Might I suggest that if that's a problem on the special use permit, we could require green pavers, and it would run, the moisture would run through that.
Right, but that's not impervious area in terms of, at that point it becomes.
I know, but that's where we could request that. If you think there's too much impervious area, you can suggest some of their parking could be.
It's just very difficult to say it's too much impervious area if it's below what we've said is the maximum impervious area.
Right.
Because then you have an application and they say it's below 66, and then we deny it because we don't like 66. That's a problem.
Right. So I think that if we specify exactly what we're comparing to 66% to, that, then all of a sudden it's similar to, the amount of units that you can get because of its developable area. And, and it's comparing apples and apples again, where, the impervious area. is
Yeah, that's sort of a naughty one for us.
is that we say we keep it at 66%, but we say of developable area.
Yeah, again, there's two things. I mean, I'd have to look at it overall. How does that, I think, work in context? Usually when you guys give me sort of, look at, I need to do this change like last time, like we looked at maximum lot coverage, we look at it, first of all, individually, because that's what we're here for. But beyond that, we sort of look at it, how does it function, right? How does it function in the real world? How would it function on any 25-acre piece, even if 50% of it were wetland? How does it function, right? And so that one's a hard one to just sort of say, add that language, because I don't know functionality, what it really means. I know what it means.
If you
just
do a
don't
little
know.
research, I think, again, I'm not sort of planning a certain development, but
I understand it, but it's hard to sort of in the context of these meetings to sort of play whack-a-mole in the sense that every time I come back, there's a new sort of issue that now I have to sort of re-engage on. I mean, I'm not saying your question isn't legit. I'm just saying what we sort of did based on the discussions at last meeting is retrench at the large multifamily development, which is 30% and 66. And we said, okay, our density is higher, but we'll live with the same sort of coverage issue. They have a lower density, but they still have the impervious coverage at 66, and they have the lot coverage at 30. So less density. We have more density, but we don't have any more coverage, or we don't have any more maximum impervious coverage or lot coverage. So we felt like that's a pretty good compromise. They have less density, and we have more density, but we're going to match their coverage issues, right?
And maybe they weren't concerned because of the fact that it was a 60-acre site, and at only 10 units per acre.
Yeah, but you still got 66% coverage.
Right, but so at that point, you're not as concerned when you have that larger area that you would ever, meet that coverage. But as your density increases and your parking requirements increase, because the other one actually had, I guess, garages for all
what
the
can we
units,
do
but-
with this, just to move things along? Are we going to continue this meeting so they can take a look at it? You want them to take a look at it, or?
Yeah, I think.
What he's saying is he can't figure it right now.
I mean, I don't know how it works schematically. It's, what we do is we look at like what Mayfield did, what they designed. We look at some other locations of apartments and see, what their coverages are, what works and what doesn't. Not to maximize the number of units, but to sort of say, given all the moving parts in this kind of regulation, what works and what doesn't. And I could come back and say, yeah, if you want, something less, this seems to work okay. We plotted out on a 25-acre piece with, figuring so much wetlands and so much this, because, I mean, you're not trying to design a regulation that doesn't work. If you design one that doesn't work, we're just, we're wasting everyone's time. Again, that seemed to me to be contextually something that you guys were satisfied with. It doesn't, I don't think it's something, when you go to the building at 30%, it doesn't sort of, get you to a point where, you're building a huge parking lot, because it's, it's less than, it's a little over half, and it also counts the buildings, right?
Okay, now you're going to take a look at that for the next meeting then? Is that? Yeah,
we'll take a look at that.
The only thing to keep in mind is the next meeting is literally next Thursday.
Week, yeah.
So the turnaround time to get us any new information would be, tomorrow or Monday at the latest, if you'd be willing to accept it.
Or we could have this emailed.
Right.
That's what
I'm saying.
I can send it to her by email, and then she can obviously email it to you.
So if you, okay.
When does this have to be voted on, or the final meeting?
The closed public hearing date is June 26th, or July 26th, sorry.
Oh, so we have to close it, we'd have to vote
By,
on it
yeah,
next
by
week.
next week, and you don't meet
Well,
not.
close
hearing.
Close it next week and vote on it
Just
later,
close it.
but
Yeah.
they'd have no time to
If we don't
change
close
it.
it next week, it automatically passes, so.
They'd have
No.
no time to change it.
Automatically
Yeah,
goes
you close
down.
You close it, and then you have 30,
Is anybody else going?
It's, you have 65 days from the time you close the public
Yeah.
hearing to make a decision.
so we'd have 65 days, but they don't have that to
It'll
change
say
it.
that.
Change it.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want us to take a look at? I mean, while we're looking.
I know, that's what I was hoping.
I mean,
It's
sort of
too
while
bad
you're
people
looking.
didn't call you ahead of time before that we could have taken care of this.
Right. No, it's fine.
I apologize for that.
It's not a problem.
Any more questions or problems with what's in front of you? Okay, one we solved, and the other apparently is still up in the air.
Right.
This last one.
I always review the tail of the tape.
Attorney Smith, what is it that you understand that these people want?
Well, the main one that we really have to look at is the maximum impervious coverage issue, how that works, how that fits in. And with regard to the open space, we're going to do something with some language on slopes. And perhaps we might add the words accessible or usable with regard to the open space generally. The commission considers accessible or usable, so that we're not talking about, again, we're not talking about land that floods, or is chronically flooded or something like that. So that seems to be a reasonable approach.
Yeah, I don't know if even slope would be the one you want, because you may want to use that as a trail.
Again, maybe we just say which commission shall consider,
Usable,
accessible or usable.
yeah. Okay, those are,
Other than that, I don't know if there's anything else. I think we settled the building height thing with
Right.
3 stories eve, and then, so we'll chug that in there.
Okay, okay.
To open it to the public.
Everybody happy? Okay. Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against this application? Come forward, please. I don't have to tell you, Karen, the name and address, please.
Hi, Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple Street. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I was putting out a few fires outside. I don't know if you talked about the 25 acres or not residential and how it might affect other properties in town. Last time we talked about the 91 corridor and not allowing, and I don't know what that is. I missed that part, so I'm sorry.
The blue part there is the 91, and then the square is the west of 91, and then the other would be down to the river. The only thing I would question perhaps is the commission is, would you want it to extend towards the river, since that's the gateway project?
Well, yeah, so it's going to affect all the zones in that area and overlay zones and all. Is this going to be like an overlay zone, or because it will change everything you're designing in this area by the sound, if you allow it along that corridor.
But you're limited by size of the
Right, but it doesn't mean somebody couldn't accumulate 25 acres. So, anyway, that was one of my concerns. Consistency in the regulations, I think, is important. Stating that developable acres, and using all the same language. Maybe all your regulations aren't there, but they should get there, as you change them, and make them more consistent.
But the trouble with doing it piecemeal when it doesn't.
Yeah, I know, but it's hard to do it with what we've been having for staffing issues. So, I like the idea of putting the same language in there that was in there for the multifamily housing district regarding the 50% slope and the certified soil scientist. I mean, why not just repeat that same statement? Why do something new that everybody has to learn separate? If you have the same statement for your open space everywhere, it's the same. And you don't have to say, well, is that allowed in residential or industrial or, whatever. And those are my basic concerns. So, and I talked about allowed housing types. It looks like the list would include condos. And is that what you're looking for? Just look at these regulations before you decide as to how it'll affect everywhere. That it's going to be allowed. And it's not just a project, it's any project that you're going to allow it in that area. So see what anybody can come up with. But thank you.
Thank you. That's anyone else who would like to speak in favor or against this application? Anyone else would speak in favor or against the application? Last call this evening to speak in favor for or against this application. Okay.
Again, with the direction I have, the only question I would have for the chairman is, we obviously could redefine that. To me, it seems to work okay. You'd still have to have 25 acres. It'd have to meet a whole bunch of criteria. Frankly, if someone was willing in some of your more distressed areas to take 25 acres and rehab it to multifamily, it probably would be a good thing. But, that's up to you guys to decide, not me.
Well, I was just, the only thing is, the commission, since we're talking on this part from 91 to the river, if you want to include that in this zone. Or only the west part of 91.
You mean the east part?
I would say not to get them confused. I would just
I
have it
think
west.
what we would need to think about is what they're calling Rivergate now, the Thompsonville area would be its own separate, but south of that or north of that area, if there were 25 developable acres there.
Yeah, but I would keep this on the west,
But I'm saying is
on the east side.
But again, but north of the Thompsonville area, if there was an area
Right,
north of Thompsonville on the west side of 91, why would we stop somebody from doing something that may be?
Okay, so then you would say, with the exception of west of the,
No.
I'm sorry, except to the west on the Thompson Gateway project.
North or south of the Gateway.
no,
The
okay.
exception, with the exception of north and south of the Gateway project.
Yeah.
The rest of it could stay, east and west.
Could we exempt, don't you have a Thompsonville sort of district or something?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
So why don't
So
we say
exempting
accept the Thompsonville, whatever you call it?
Right.
This
Whatever
is very
they're calling it
difficult,
now.
though, because this is becoming, the more we put in locational parts to this zoning text change, the more it becomes a district, a type of district, right? Because we're looking at a map
voting
and we're
district.
saying, where are we going to allow things to be built? And that becomes more of a map change, then it becomes a text change. So I would caution against putting so many locational points into this text change.
You're right, and then it becomes spot zoning, and we can't do
no,
spot zoning.
You're nowhere near spot zoning,
Right,
trust
so
me.
I'm
It's so
just saying
huge, you're not even close to spot zoning, even with
I
the,
I don't have a problem leaving it.
again,
That whole section, east and west.
my argument would be if someone were willing to purchase and consolidate in that area 25 acres and say, this is,
Yeah,
we're
that
going
would
to.
be tough to do on that.
Well, no, but I'm saying you might look at it and say that's a great thing, right? That you're rehabbing 25 acres of that area. So I'm not sure why.
But there's different, there's different requirements in that section, though.
Right.
Well, then if It is what it is.
That would preclude it too.
That would preclude it, I guess. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I don't look at that as a negative if someone were able to do it.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
It's up to
and
the-
of course, you'd have to be next to an industrial commercial area. It couldn't be just sort of in the middle of the housing. So,
Okay,
okay.
yeah. Anything further before we let them go and they get their act together and we get ours? Okay, again, I have to reopen it. Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against? Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against the application? Last call this evening to speak in favor or against motion to do something, continue. I've already closed it, I'm sorry.
I didn't hear closed.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we continue public hearing 2909 to our next public hearing, our next meeting date of July 19th, 2018.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded, all in favor? Opposed? This is unanimous. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay, thank you. We have moved item 2921, 16 Pinecrest Road, up at this point. No,
Hi.
did we?
Yes.
Yes.
I need to recuse myself. I'll be back when it's over.
We'll send somebody after you. Okay.
Or watch it on television and
Yeah, figure it out. Hey.
Hello.
Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis.
Here.
Virginia Higley is a recluse herself. Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar.
Here.
And Richard Suzak is here.
Commissioners DeGray, Salazar, and Gruber will be sitting in for the absent commissioners.
Oh. The Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, July 12th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning the following application. Public hearing 2921, 16 Pinecrest Road, special use application to extend a deck and install an accessory structure, a pool, within the Lake Overlay District. Sabra Hamsdell, owner applicant, map 97, lot 87, R33 zone in the Lake Overlay District. Dated this 30th day of June 2018, Charles Duran, Chairman.
This is approved by the Wetlands number 591. If you will, please identify yourselves and explain to the commission what it is you are wanting to do.
Good evening. My name is Sabra Ramsdell. This is my husband, Kevin Ramsdell, and we live at 16 Pinecrest Road. And we had obtained permission from Wetlands to take down some trees in order to open up enough sun to put an above-ground pool in our backyard, and then to extend an existing deck that's attached to the back of the house to the end of the house. It's a fairly small size deck at this point. It's about 15 feet by 15. We'd like to extend that from the dining room down to the end of the house. So it would wind up being somewhere around 48 feet, I think, by 15 feet. And the pool that we would like to install by Teddy Bear Pools is an above-ground 15 by 30-foot pool.
And the reason is that you need to come to us to do this?
We were told that we had to come to you because in the Lakes District, the backyard is really considered the front yard. And so we had to get some special permission for accessory structures.
As I understand it, you are depending on which way you're coming in, you're either the first or the last of this area, is that right?
We are, if you're going down Pinecrest being on your right, we're the fourth house in on your left.
But I mean, you're the last house that's in the lake zone.
Oh, I believe
Yeah, there's
so.
only her house and one other house on that entire road that happens to be within the Lake District, just because their backyards abut the lake.
Right. That's what I was trying to get across, so that when we did the thing, their really front yard is the front yard, not why we changed the other one. Questions for them? I have a couple, just so that we have it right. On your, on the request, you say you want to do the deck 15 by 50 feet. Now, another one, it says it's given as 15 feet by 48 feet. That's on the request letter, which is different from the application letter. Your building layout that was given us, the diagram says it's 14 by 12 feet, which makes it 160 square feet, which is that's the plan up here, the picture that I was going by, the measurements. And the main house is 45 feet, as I can figure, is by width. So my question is, what's the length of this porch that you want that we have to give you permission for? You're going the length of the house, which I guess is 45 feet by...
Well, the length of the existing deck, I believe, is 15 feet, and then...
Yes, it's 15. It says... The building layout says it's 14 by 12. I don't know.
Is that the building layout from the appraisal that was done?
Right.
Okay, so the appraisal was, we refinanced in order to do some of this, so the appraiser measurements are probably more accurate than mine, but I don't believe he was considering the length of the house the way we were looking at it when I filed the application, because I was including the garage, which is on the other end, and I don't think they include that.
Well, that's why I wanted to get, when we give you permission, it's got to be right. Am I figuring right, Rich? By the...
Yeah, it's hard to, I can't hardly see it, but it appears that the house is around 48 feet long. And is your deck going to extend out beyond the edge of your house?
No.
It's just going to sort of end at the end of the house.
Yes.
So basically, if we said it was 48 feet or 50 feet at the most, it would sort of cover the entire length of the back house.
Correct.
All right, and I think that
is that okay. But then the width is going to be the 15. Okay. The distance is what I had problems with because it was stated differently in several places.
I can understand why that's confusing.
And we have to give you the exact figures. All right, so Rich, you make that motion and...
Can I it's a public hearing, so...
All right.
I just wanted to, are you doing the work yourselves?
On the deck?
On the deck.
No, I don't believe so. We had thought about doing that, but I think we kind of decided we're a little too old for that. And but I haven't chosen a contractor for that yet. I did talk to the building department, and they explained what was necessary and pointed me to the guidelines for the within the building department. But when I kind of took a look at those, we just went, I'm not sure we could handle this.
That's what I was getting at, and you're familiar with them, so you understand
Yes,
the
I
requirements.
know where to look and what to look at.
Okay.
And we may actually not do the deck this year because we're kind of encumbered with the landscaping end of it and the pool and the trees, and it's been kind of a big undertaking.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Well, I do say, I was over there this morning, and I was surprised how much they already cleared out of your lot. It was like, holy crap.
Okay.
I mean, they took a lot of, it seemed like a lot of area they've cleared.
They did. Well, we had requested, I think, 30 trees, and he broke it down. The gentleman that we're using as a contractor submitted all his insurance information, and they've been really amazing. They were there yesterday morning, and they were there today. I think they're going to be back there tomorrow to clean up.
Yeah,
but they did
it was I went over there and saw how much they had already done this morning, and that was like at 8 o'clock.
They're just about done with the trees. Now it's just cleaning up and,
So,
yeah,
big area.
too big.
Okay. Any further questions? Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against this application? Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against this application? Last call to speak in favor or against this application. Jan, what do we, number one is a deck, but do we have to correct the location of the swimming pool? In other words, the reason we have it basically is because their front yard is their front yard and not their backyard, and
Right.
okay.
Are you asking about the resolution?
Yeah. What do we do? Just say put it where you want to? Does it say that?
I mean, it says consistent with the application materials and site plan.
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
can put that like a site-specific condition that says the correct size of the deck, so that we know in the file what they're approved for, or future staff know what they were approved for.
Okay, yeah, you want to take care of the deck size.
Right. Right.
Okay, then I didn't close it yet then. I'll close public hearing 2921.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the draft resolution dated July 12, 2018 for public hearing 2921, but amended to add a site-specific condition that the deck be sized at 15 by
I think it was 48.
by 48.
That was
or
the
not to
final.
extend past the
Yeah.
end of the house.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
It's good to me.
Okay, hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Enjoy your swimming in your deck.
We hope so. Thank you very much.
Sorry you had to go through all this, but...
No, that's quite all right.
Makes us appreciate what
And
you
thank
do.
you for waiting. Tried to move it up. Okay, back to the schedule. 2920, 33 Palumba Drive, special use permit. The applicant's here.
We need the public.
All night.
Yeah, right, okay.
Where would you like this? Maybe right here?
We have
right
an
over
easel,
here, and the
'cause-
standard is there because
You'll be on television.
you'll be on television.
Okay.
Charles Durin.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis. Here. Virginia Higley.
Here.
Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar.
Here.
And Richard Suzak is here.
Should I ask for 5 minutes?
The
before
Enfield
rest?
Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a
go
public
with
hearing
those.
on Thursday, July 12, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning the following application. Public hearing 2920, 33 Palumbo Drive, special use permit application to renovate an existing 3,500 square foot space to accommodate classrooms for a technical school. Machem LLC, owner applicant, map 57, lot 343, BR zone. Dated this 30th day of June 2018. Charles Durin, chairman.
Let's see, who's sitting in? Commissioner Salazar is going to be sitting in, Commissioner Gruber and DeGray. Good evening, gentlemen. If you will introduce yourselves, please. Jan, could you slope that so that they can pick it up on TV? It's got to come over more. Good, that's perfect. If you will introduce yourself, gentlemen.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Travis Ward. manager of 33 Plumber Drive, here along with Mr. Ken Vincunis, managing member of Manchem LLC, the ownership group, and Dr. Phil Krebs, COO of Porter and Chester Institute, which currently has a location on Weymouth Road here in Enfield. We're here tonight seeking special permit approval for Unit 2, the renovation of Unit 2 at 33 Plumber Drive, and ultimately the relocation of the nursing division of Porter and Chester Institute, which is on Weymouth Road. In a few minutes, I'll have Dr. Krebs explain to you a little bit about Porter and Chester Institute and what they're looking to do from Weymouth Road to 33 Plumber Drive. I would like to give you a brief introduction of the property and what we have done or what we propose to do in order to accommodate this client. 33 Plumber Drive is a multi-tenant retail establishment across from Gale Toyota. Firestone Auto Care is there, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Gale Toyota and Enfield Ford have accessory uses there. So as you can see, it's primarily an automotive use. We are interested in Porter and Chester Institute to diversify the use a little bit. The population there like to see the attractiveness of students or this particular use to be able to take advantage of other kinds of clients instead of just solely automotive use. The parking ratio, as you see, we have 238 spaces on the entire property, 9.5 spaces per 1,000, pretty high density. And I'll let you ask questions later on, anything else on that. If I could flip the other page, I want to show you just...
You can go up there, and because it'll pick you up if you take the hand microphone.
Oh, sure.
And point everything out to us.
You got to get it close.
Okay. All I really wanted to do was to, excuse me, to flip to the site, the unit itself here. I'm going to stand it.
Well, you can stand up there because actually you're on TV, so you're doing a promotion for yourself.
Right. So the floor plan, which was in your packets, this was just given to us today in preparation for this meeting, and we have it'll be reviewed by code by an engineer. It'll be stamped eventually and submitted to the building department upon this commission's approval of the special permit. And as you can see, there's an existing front entrance along with 2 rear egresses, so it'll be code compliant. There'll be 3 classrooms, each of which can hold students, of course, and I'll let, again, Dr. Phil Krebs talked about some of the population and amounts of students that'll be there and the times and such. There's a lab, and then there's a couple of administrative offices along with testing rooms, and these is where a student would actually go in and take a test. So very low impact build out. An additional use besides the automotive, which is beneficial to the owner and I believe the surrounding community, and it'll meet all the code requirements of that space.
Now, what section of the building, because I believe that was on the other side?
Unit number 2 is proposed, Porter and Chester's proposed unit number 2, which is right next to Firestone, so just about in the center of the building, maybe a little forward of center. And their proposed parking is generally in the middle because that's widely available. The automotive uses currently use quite a bit of the back and the sides because they're not so reliant on customers coming in and out. So the customers for Firestone Enterprise primarily use the front.
Questions on this aspect of the... Okay. Fine, they were apparently...
I'll let Dr. Phil Krebs talk about the use specifically.
Sure. So
Porter & Chester's been around since 1946. We typically have schools that not only offer nursing programs, but also skilled trades, such as electrician, HVAC, low voltage. We also have automotive, et cetera. We currently have an operation in Enfield, as was pointed out earlier. We do have 2 locations within 17 and 25 miles of the Enfield location. We've decided to reduce our footprint in Enfield, so we're closing down the trade programs and going to focus primarily on serving our nursing students. So this is going to be a standalone nursing-only school. Currently, we have about 70 nurses, nursing students at the location. We expect the population to stay about at that number, maybe increase a little. And this is primarily due to the fact that this will afford us one opportunity that we don't currently have on Weymouth Drive, or Road rather, and that is public transportation. Many of our students take public transportation, so this will afford them access to our school that they currently don't have. So obviously that wouldn't have any impact on a parking issue. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Why wouldn't you have looked at the professional area where all the doctors and the labs and stuff are currently, further up on Hazard Avenue?
We did a property scan of all available locations. There are several factors that we look at when we identify properties. This hit almost every note that we needed in that regard. Accessibility, public transportation, branding opportunity, a reasonable traffic count, all of which, frankly, we do not have currently in our Enfield location.
That's true.
Just as a side question, do you foresee doing your dental program here ever?
No.
Expanding that? Just this is going to be.
At this time, we have no plans. If we were going to do that, because we don't have a dental program currently in our Enfield location, we closed that down as well.
Oh, okay.
If we were going to go move in that direction, we would have done it at this time. This is a little bit of a different model for Porter & Chester. We typically build out 50,000 to 104,000 square foot locations. So doing 3,500 square feet is a dramatic change for us, but it affords us an opportunity to better serve the nursing population that we have.
Further questions?
Go ahead.
Yes.
I looked at your documentation. Our documentation was submitted, and so you say you expect your population to be about 70, because I thought I read you expect it to increase to about 150.
Well, again, it depends on where it goes, and you also need to realize that the population is roughly split 50-50 day and evening. And I don't know what the hours of operation are of the other businesses in the plaza, but I don't imagine that they're going to have too many people coming in between the hours of 7 and 11 at night, which again is 50% of our population. We would love for it to grow to that number. Frankly, that's what I told my board, and they're looking forward to that. But right now, it's primarily about better serving the current population and giving a new population access to us that currently doesn't have that.
Well, part of the reason I bring that up in terms of the number of people that are going to be using the facility, so let's say that we have 75 individuals. Did you give any consideration of additional pedestrian traffic in front of the bays for Firestone? Is that a consideration? Are you assuming are they changing anything? Is that?
I'm in everything from shopping malls to strip centers with multi-use, all types of use. I've never had any issues with regard to any tenants and interference with any tenants. Typically, students come in, they enter the front door, they stay inside for the entire time of instruction, and they get in their cars or hop on the bus and go home. That's it.
Okay.
Just as a question, so if I was enrolled enrolled in your practical nursing program, it's a collective class where all the students arrive at the same time and they're there for a 4-hour period or a 6-hour period at a time? Or are there different classes that, sort of rotate, that, first you do diaper changing, and then I have no clue what about.
You got it though.
No clue what nurses do. I do know what nurses do, but so is there sort of an ongoing flux of different classes during the day, or is it a constant population just sitting there being instructed by a certain professor? Or,
the population is by no means static. The reason for that is because there's a clinical aspect of the program.
Excuse me, please, and the audience, gentlemen, if you wish to talk, please take it outside. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So typically this has a clinical aspect to it. So as an example, depending on when the class is out on clinical, they're out at a clinical site. They're not actually at the location itself. And that is an entire term. So, class comes in, let's say they start with 20 students in a particular class. They may be with us for 2 terms or 3 terms, and then they go out on clinical, so they're not actually on the location. So although the numbers reflect that we have a population of 70 students, there's probably 15 to 20 of that 70 that are out on clinical and actually aren't on the site at that particular time. I think that's what you're referring to.
Anyone else? Anyone in the audience would like to speak in favor or against this application? Anyone in the audience would like to speak in favor or against this application? Last call to speak in favor or against the application. I'm sorry to see you leave your other site because you've done, I don't know how many years. I think I was on the commission when you first came. And I know you have your big shows down there yearly, and you've been a very good resident for us, and we're glad you aren't leaving entirely, and wish you much success over this. So let me close 2930. 2920. Thank you. 2920. Close the right one.
I think Portchester program is a great program. They've been good in the town, good steward to the community. But my concern is the location. It's in the plan of conservation and development for automotive and retail. It's not for schools. And there is an area further down on Hazard Avenue that has tons of spaces for doctor-type facilities.
Isn't that building next to Gale, isn't that a doctor's office?
Directly across the street?
Yes.
Yeah, there are doctors in there.
They probably were
No, it was built as doctor's offices, I believe.
When?
Right next to Gale is a real estate office in there also.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
but there's real estate and medical.
Yeah, again,
At least
I think
2.
it's a great idea, but I think that I'll probably vote against it only because it could be better serving another area of the town.
Also, there's a medical center 3 buildings north.
Yeah. It's, that's true. We just allowed the signs here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't hold. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the draft resolution for public hearing 2920 33 Palumbo Drive in accordance with the prepared, planning and zoning draft statement dated July 12, 2018 with the conditions listed.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any opposed? 1. So it's 6-0. I'm sorry, 6-1-0. Good luck at that location.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Site plan review, 1751 Moody Road. The applicant here, okay, you are.
I'm going to recuse myself.
I have this one too. Oh, wetlands? Was this wetland? All right.
Goodbye. Oh, thank you. I'm not coming
Yeah, what's
back,
your
though.
hurry?
I'm not coming back.
No, just hold on.
Stuff in my cupcake. Yeah,
See you next week.
Slide all your stuff over or no?
We saw you two just recently.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have all your numbers back already. We came back.
Oh, boy.
Oh, God.
All right.
A few minutes. For a few minutes, I was out in the hall. My wife called, "You okay?"
No, is that right? Yeah. She
Watching
does,
me,
they don't
my
let you
every
wait.
move
No, I
here.
know.
Oh.
All right. Let's see. Who we got sitting in?
If you want.
Commissioner Grubers, DeGray, and Salazar will be sitting in. You got to take the roll.
Okay, Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis.
Here.
Virginia Higley is no longer here with us. Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar.
Here.
And Richard Suzak is here.
Okay, gentlemen, introduce yourself. We don't know who you are.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Frank Triano, representing Triano Realty Corporation. To my left is David Zayaks of Hesketh and Associates, civil engineer for the site. Also with us tonight, we're here for the Martin Brower application for an expanded parking lot use. We also have Christopher Cotto, one of the executives, along with Matt Riker, who's also an executive with the Martin Brower Corporation. In addition, out there's also several family members from Toronto Realty Corporation as well interested in the project. Just wanted to introduce us. We have a project here for an existing user. It's been in Enfield since the 80s. They've been a wonderful tenant. We have a wonderful relationship. They are one of the highest, according to the town website. It's actually, I think, number 6 on your list of employers for the town. And we're here to see if we can get them to be accommodated a little bit more. They're busy. It's kind of the same conversation we had at Wetlands. They're looking to expand to the town, and that's exactly what our application is here for, and we represent. I'm going to let David Zayaks actually continue on and go from there.
Good evening. What I did was I put up on the easel over there a copy of a colored rendering of the site plan superimposed over the top of a current Google photograph, aerial photo. The site is located on Moody Road. It's in the I-1 zone. It's on the north side. It's 11.2 acres. If my pointer works, we won't have to get up. This is Moody Road on this side here. North is to the right side of the drawing. Abutting the site on the west side is the old railroad line located in this location here. There's another industrial development here over on the east side. It's more industrial development users on the north. And running across the back side, the north side of the site, is an unnamed tributary watercourse. That's, this whole site is all part of the beginnings of the freshwater brook watershed. And we went through an extensive review with the Wetlands Commission as to potential impacts to the wetlands and the property. Right now, it's the westerly half of the site is developed. This is the existing Martin Brower distribution facility. It's 104,111 square feet. It's 1 story. Located in the front here along Moody Road is employee parking. There's employee parking in the rear at the north end of the site. And then here along the east side of the building is where all of the truck distribution takes place. There's a large detention basin located right here, shaded in that green color. This side of the site is a complicated area. It has some substantial wetlands located on that property, on that portion of the property. So we had to work the design of the expansion of the parking areas and recognizing the limitations with the wetlands on that site. So what the proposal is to construct a new employee parking area right in this location right here. That would be 51 new employee parking spaces. There are currently 82 parking spaces with the two lots, the one in the front and the one in the rear. And then we would also add 25 new truck parking locations, which are these larger locations right here, and some scattered in this area over in here, and expand the distribution area, operations area for the site, and relieve a lot of the congestion on the site. There's currently a driveway located right here that is for the employee parking area. And the main driveway into the facility that is shared sometimes by cars and sometimes by trucks is located right here. So a critical element of this new layout is the introduction of a new driveway down here at the east end of the site, which will be in for the trucks. So the trucks would come in this way here and conduct their activities. Some of them park, some of them are loaded and leave the site. And then the trucks would leave through this main entrance located at this location here. So we'll be cutting down a lot of the traffic going in and out of that driveway with this new configuration. And the employees' parking area, which would be located here, is isolated from all of these driveways. It's sort of in, there's connection points, but it's out of the main flow of vehicles coming and going out of the site. This area right here would be a relocation and reconstruction of their current on-site diesel fueling station they have on the site for their trucks. We're going to be putting in a state-of-the-art facility there and actually putting a canopy over the fueling area. Right now it's exposed to the elements, so we have a little canopy proposed there that'll provide some cover during tough weather conditions. So the impervious coverage currently right now is 44.4%. We'll be going to 55.4%. 66% is the maximum in the I-1 zone, so we're considerably below the maximum impervious coverage. We do have a comprehensive stormwater plan. We'll be enhancing that existing detention basin. And then we are also adding in 3 new water quality basins that would be located, one over in this area here, one over in this area here, and one over here, to treat the stormwater runoff and coming off the site and polish that water before it gets into the wetland and watercourse systems. There'll be no increase in peak runoff from the site. Between the detention pond and the water quality basins, they do a good job in both providing water quality enhancement but also maintaining peak runoff from the site. We are proposing new LED site lighting for the parking areas. It'd be 25 feet in height. A detail for that is on the sheet UT1 for you. We have a full landscaping plan shown on sheets LS1 and LS2. In addition to your standard landscaping within the parking lot areas, we have a fairly extensive amount of wetlands and mitigation plantings to provide buffers to the wetland systems and the watercourses surrounding us. And that was all reviewed and approved by your Wetlands Commission. We have received, really through the wetlands process, full review by the town engineer, and actually his comments have already been incorporated into the plans because we filed the wetlands approved plans already as required by staff. So the town engineer's comments were addressed. That's about it. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have. There is no change to the building and really no change to the existing pavement in operations. This is an expansion of the existing operations.
Just a question to Jen. What was the engineer's concerns?
The engineer's concerns were more like technical regarding like the pipes. I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, so I don't remember exactly. I don't have it directly in front of me, but it was the...
I believe it was the types of pipe being used for the runoff.
Okay, thank you. I just was reading the wetlands approval, and it said to address the engineer concerns, and I just wanted to know what they were. Thank you.
Oh, because, yeah, on ours it said there were no concerns, so, okay. Good, good. There were, Jan, there were nothing from the police department or fire or anything like that, because they, especially police, you have 3 new entrances or 2 new entrances.
No, we haven't received comments back from them as of yet, and I apologize. I normally put together a memo for you guys with all the comments.
I understand that, but they shouldn't have to have too much prodding once they get the notifications that we're requesting it. It just is, if there's something they want, it's hard to do it after the fact, of course. And if they didn't have an ART and they weren't there, which they wouldn't have probably on this.
Yeah, no, there was not an ART.
Mr. Chairman, also, there's only one added entrance, and that would be on the east side. The other location in the center is actually existing.
The others were there. Well, they might be a little happier, but still. Okay, and
they've been notified. They should read.
That's the problem. Once in a while, we have the police had no comments, nothing from the fire department, and health department had nothing. I don't know, that's the wetlands, just the wetlands number. They did approve.
Yes. I would think that the police would be happier with the traffic flow because
I would think so too, right.
There's been times where I've gone down Moody Road and they've been over to the side waiting because they're waiting for the trucks to get out and they're trying to get in.
Yep.
I was impressed with the number of trailers that are over there in that space. I was like, that's some driving.
A lot of people are eating at McDonald's, I guess, with the trucks going out of there.
I can tell you folks that we work on many, many distribution facilities, a lot of them over in Windsor. And for 104,000 square feet, this is the most efficient distribution center I've ever seen in my life. They're amazing how they handle the number of trucks in and out of there. You would think this is 250,000 square feet, not 104,000 square feet.
They took us through there when it first opened, and the organization is amazing.
It's really amazing.
It's similar, I guess, to the way they have the restaurants organized too. That everything's right down.
Very impressive.
Right.
I have a question, pure curiosity on my side. You're extending the number of parking lots for employees. Is
Yes.
the workforce also going to increase significantly? That's just curiosity.
There's lots of jobs available, so.
Yeah, they did mention that they have that opportunity coming up, and obviously this has got to go first. They don't have the site requirements for the parking that they need, as mentioned, you know, from Commissioner DeGray, that part of the concern that they have, and that they certainly are advertising right now for more employees.
Oh, that's a good thing for the town.
Yeah, I completely agree.
There's a little bit of cheating going on out there too, if you look at the way that the cars are parked. So this will bring everything.
Well, let's not talk about
this will bring everything in conformance. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, it's site plan review.
Yeah, I just have one question. In terms of, you know, your new diesel dispensary, you know, system, and that's, you know, you do have some protection for spills for that? You know, I imagine wetlands would have required you to do. Could you sort of just elaborate on what you're doing for that kind of protection?
Well, first of all, the whole system is going to be upgraded to the latest standards instead of sort of a little bit of hodgepodge that's out there right now. So that's a good start. And then the canopy was very important to the Wetlands Commission because rainfall down on the pumps and the fueling area will be cut off by the canopies, so you eliminate that wash down of the pumps and things of that nature. And then just the standard thing around the edge of the concrete pad will have the edging that goes around, so it'll capture any kind of spills. But again, this is diesel fuel, so it's not gasoline. So they're a little less concerned about diesel fuel than they would be with gasoline runoff. And then, of course, everything that drains from the site has to go through the water quality basins. So that all added up, I think they were pretty comfortable.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the draft resolution for SPR 1751 prepared by staff dated July 12, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You. Any correspondence from the commission? Any commissioner correspondence?
Mr. Chair, I have a copy of an article that I'm going to give to members of the planning office of new use for an empty mall, and I think it'll be interesting reading. It's from the Pasco News, Florida.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Anyone else? Hearing none, Director of Planning.
All right. So I know that you guys at the last meeting talked about Shaker Heights and their bond requirements. There was some question regarding whether letters of credit would be allowed to be accepted instead of bonds, and we did address that. Rick, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yes, I actually I spoke to finance, and they have not given me anything formal one way or the other at this point in time. They're considering it. They will give us something in writing, so we have something to go on. But as it stands now, in the past week, I haven't received anything formal from them. So as soon as we do, we'll let you know.
So that was intended Shaker Heights, where Ken had asked about
lines of credit.
Lines of credit, and I guess you were told that they would, but we want it in writing and then to check it out legally.
Yeah, so once we receive something, we would send it over to the town manager / town attorney through that process.
If we get one.
And now you had another one.
We also brought up at the last meeting the idea of the Enfield markets, that sort of multi-vendor situation in one retail space in what was formerly the Crown Furniture. After that meeting, I went back and I discussed what we had talked about with the customer, the would-be applicant, and he wanted me to look into the Southwood markets on Raffia Road. How were those approved? And those were approved under retail sales in that space, because the key factor is they had one checkout place for the whole space for all the vendors. So, I guess now the applicant wants to know, would he be able to actually apply under retail sales if he did the same thing with one checkout for all of the vendors in that space? So I said that I would ask. So I just want to get what your interpretation of that would be.
Question. The retail space over on Raffia Road, isn't that open 7 days a week?
Yes.
So it's a regular type store front, and this gentleman's only asking for 2
so.
days a week?
Right. For now, yeah.
I think that addresses some of the concerns with the Converse situation, because you have sort of a procedure set up and order, and the vendor slots would probably be fixed because the checkout would be fixed, and you'd sort of have to plan for that. So I like that as an idea, and if it's something the commission has approved in the past, it seems consistent with that.
And quick question, what did our town attorney say about this type of thing?
We hadn't gotten that far, because they normally tell us if you have any question with the regulations, the commission interprets their own. So this is sort of step one. If you want us to send it to the town attorney, we can do that.
I would like to hear his opinion, his clarification on it, seeing that we're talking a lot bigger space and a smaller time of being open. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it does. And the number of vendors. I guess I just don't want to say, yeah, okay, and then we have another empty store and another possible
Flea market.
faux flea market, because that's basically what it would be, is a faux flea market,
gonna
having a single checkout. That's, I'm just, I just want to hear
Bringing new
their
stuff in.
opinion for clarification.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
It would be, yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would think I'd be a little concerned about the truck traffic in there. If they're only going to be there 2 days, that means those vendors are going to be unloading every Friday and loading back up every Monday to haul their junk in and out. So it's
Right.
going to be,
Maybe not.
you won't have,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what their plan is. It was
yeah,
more
but you won't
preliminary.
really have assurance with the same vendors to be there to warranty whatever you got from the last time.
Yeah. Again, we don't really have all those details. If you guys wanted, we could have them come in and sort of talk to you if you wanted to know more details before you made a decision. But that's really
Well, I think that if the merchandise was on site, all the time, and it wasn't transient, that you couldn't really consider it to be a flea market. But if it's transient, where it gets relocated or positioned into place every time there's an operating day, then I think that we would be thinking that would be more flea market type of organization. So I think that what we need to do is get some clarification as to whether the merchandise stays on site or whether it's really transient in terms of every time the store opens that it gets placed on display at that time.
There was one in Agawam that we used to go to, and they left their things there, and they covered them, and they did have. I think there was only one cashier at that place. Also, the people had to be there. I guess they brought in new stuff, but not in box loads or anything like that.
Well, it's a hard business to start with.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Well, I guess we don't really look into the timing of redelivery and restocking and any of the other retail uses that we have. I'm not as concerned. I mean, I understand the concern, but I don't think it'd be different for any other retail use. The
We
question.
only do as a result of what the neighbors are hearing all night or all day.
Yeah, that's in a neighborhood too.
Right, but that's also principally an hours of operation issue, which we would have control over generally anyway. So I don't see as much of a harm for that because we don't control how often, Target restocks, and we don't control how often every other place restocks. And by all means, places that operate more often and with much higher intensity would restock far more often. So I think a shorter use is even more desirable.
Well, I think at this time we're kind of limited from the information that we're actually getting from the possible applicant. So we have to try to get more information from him as what his intended use actually is. And it was just a question to the commission as to would you consider it? So we'll get the specifics and go from there.
Which is the store that it's being compared to? The one that you brought, you said on Raffia Road? Which
yeah, it's
one?
called Southwood. I think Antiques.
Is that on the
right
Dunkin'
in Raffia
Donuts?
That's at Raffia Plaza.
Where
Yeah.
the Dunkin' Donuts is?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
But I've
the
been
left.
in there, and that's basically antiques. It's not different things. It's antique furniture, antique jewelry, antique typewriters, books, things like.
Yeah, I hadn't been, so that's why I wanted to know which one, so I could find out.
But yeah, so
Form an
I mean
opinion.
that's kind of generally. Each one is a little unique, but it's all carrying antique furniture or antiques. So.
Yeah, I think that's generally the intent of this one as well. It's antiques and antique collectibles. He likes sports. I get he focuses mostly on sports collectibles, from what I understood when I talked to the person who's interested in applying. And I guess he already has an operation up in Springfield that's it's successful doing the same type of thing. But I can get like a narrative if you want before you make a decision. I can have them submit a narrative.
Yeah, that may be.
Or a more detailed narrative.
I guess at this point, it seems like we are either willing to consider it generally with that clarification about having a cashier in the Raffia Road operation, in which case, rather than submit a narrative for general discussion, I think the question is whether it's worth submitting an application. And it seems like, at least in my opinion, it seems like the answer is probably yes. If we have a similar operation, he's willing to structure it the same way for a prior approved use. But I obviously would want to hear what the rest of
There are possibilities to it, and it depends, I guess, is when, you know, the type of material that they're handling. I know some antique dealers, well, I used to go to Brimfield, they will show, let's say, at Brimfield with the antiques, and they pick up other stuff that they take to other shows, or just, you know, get rid of, which aren't really antiques, and that's the type of thing that used to be over at the old mall on Hazard Avenue years ago.
Yeah, and it's still over on Sophia's Plaza in the back.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I think right now it's a lot of speculation on our part without any real knowledge. So
yeah. The other thing is we can have them submit an application, and if you feel that it's not something that you can approve under your regulations, you can make that decision.
Yeah.
So I guess that sort of solves the problem.
I agree. I think he needs to submit an application with all the information, and then we can make a decision.
Informed decision.
An informed decision, as
Yeah, that's
Commissioner
right.
Lott says. But right now, we're speculating on what he wants. We don't know.
Right. Okay.
That's just
So
like
we'll
the
have them
man
apply.
on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And other than that, we held an ART recently about the Enfield Manor. They're looking to redo their buildings, or they have many buildings. They're looking to sort of get rid of all the buildings on their property and construct 2 larger buildings. So we're working with them, and they will eventually be
What's this?
coming in here. Enfield Manor on, it's Enfield Street, right?
Right, almost across from the high school. It's HUD.
Senior housing.
Housing. It's down on the, it'll be on the east side of Enfield Street, almost near the entrance for the high school. There's a number of buildings there. The changes that they want, a number of individual buildings, very small, that they want to completely eliminate and make 2 larger buildings with, I believe in one there's going to be 3 stories. The area there is elevated at one point, it slopes down. So at one point you'll have 3 stories going into 2
Housing
stories.
Authority?
I'm sorry, Housing Authority. Correct.
Yeah, they came in a plan a couple of years back, and we authorized it, and then I guess they decided not to build it, and now they changed again.
They changed the building setup and apparently new funding, grant funding available for
They
the
were
next
going
project.
down more towards 91 before. I don't know if they are now. Oh, okay.
And other than that, we updated the pending applications list by popular demand. We got a lot of people looking for that. You'll notice that Simon Road is back on that list. They resubmitted their application, so that was last Friday. So we're in the process of reviewing that, and we'll get that out to you guys as soon as possible, since that's a pretty big.
On that one, I would just ask that if there's an inventory of everything that we're to consider, because that was one in which we had discussed incorporating prior hearing information on that. Yeah. And so I would be very interested to learn how that information will be accessible to us, especially if we're going to try to incorporate by reference every prior hearing. So
Yeah, we will be incorporating by reference the past material because we gave them an open end to get it back, and they've really taken time. I don't know, can you pull excerpts from
is it
minutes or
transcripts or
something?
minutes or in any event, I would sort of
That's going to be a job.
I would ask for that. You can, I imagine, would ask the applicant to create a very detailed inventory of exactly everything we're being asked to incorporate in the past, other than everything, as the answer.
Yep.
So that's what I would ask.
I mean, they wouldn't be coming back to you guys. They're not even, they themselves are not even looking to get on an agenda until September.
I would make
so.
sure that the technical questions that were asked by Rich and Kenny
Yep.
are answered.
So, yep, and that we'll definitely review all of that stuff. And
I think that was probably what was holding them up, was getting the answers to those.
Yep. So we have that one, and on the next agenda, we have advertised the 0 King Street, the Metro Park North. So those were those huge plans you took home.
That was the multiple plans that you received.
I'm sure everyone's combed through them.
But I wasn't sure. what
Kenny
they were
did
for.
too, we got a call.
So, other than that, that's it for me.
You asked me earlier, and would you tell them the problem?
We have a situation where I had contact with a representative from Karis Reels probably about 2 months ago. They were advised the change out is that of a above-ground oil tank, number 6 fuel that they use. They can no longer get that fuel. They have to become more green compliant. So they want to change over to propane. So they were advised to submit a site plan, not everything of the property, but of the area where they wanted to place this tank, above-ground propane tank. Today I got the call from them again out of New Hampshire, looking to get on to next week's meeting. They were under the impression that because they've already filed a building permit that they were pretty much good to go. And that's obviously not the case. So my question was, they did send down some plans to me. I looked at them. It's in an area north of Oak Street on their property over there. It's a 1,000-gallon propane tank that they're going to be installing. The issue is they can no longer get the fuel that they're using for the process. That stops in September. And if they don't get this installed because of the ordering process for the special tank, then they're not going to be able to operate for some time. So my question was, if it's limited impact, I have the elevations for what they're going to do. I have the site plan. I'll go out there tomorrow and take pictures, do whatever I have to do, and get a report. And maybe next week you guys might be able to review it.
You checking with Flanagan too?
Sorry?
Have you checked with Flanagan?
Yeah, that's what.
No, that's one of the issues. I already told them we got to check with police, fire.
Well, absolutely, because it's,
Before that's a priority. If there's a problem with it, then they're going to have to wait till September, like everyone else at this point
main
in
one
time.
would be the fire, and then second with police.
They're supposed to get me the full-size plans. As soon as I get them, I'll get them off to the fire department. And if we can do it, then just for your consideration at the next meeting, that's all.
Oh, yeah, it can go on the agenda, because we'll have to take it up before we take up King Street there. Because that's going to be a long one.
Yep.
Okay, anything further from anybody?
Yes, I've forgotten to ask, Rick, I've been meaning to ask you for a month now. There's a guy putting a garage up on Abbey Road on his house. I don't know if he came to you or came to us to get approval for that. It's if you're going south, it's on the left side on Abbey Road, but it's all new siding, or not siding, but sheathing on there.
Okay, I'll check tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have to go out that way for something else anyway, so I'll check.
I'm just curious if he ever pulled applications or anything. Or
a lot of them don't.
I don't know if
Remember
it
hearing
was
about it.
if it was something that just was in compliance with the zoning regulations. Normally, many times they just go through the building department, and if it doesn't impact, then just an addition
Could
on.
have been, I don't know. I just curious whether he,
I'll check and see it tomorrow. I'll let you know.
not wanting to cause him any problems, but
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if there's nothing further,
I will move to adjourn.
Second.
motion's made to adjourn. All in favor? Thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen. We made it through another